Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Lily sat on the girl's lap, listening to his story with rapt attention, while he recalled his childhood, how he was happy with his grandfather, who took him in his arms like that. She told him about her life. "You know, granddaughter, my grandfather was royalty. Yeah, don't laugh. A relative of his was a favorite of the queen herself. He was very rich. You lavished him with lands and jewels, and my grandfather even saw them. I'd like to see them too. They must be so beautiful, given by the queen herself." "You are right. Not only are they beautiful, but they're priceless." "You were right." And then they disappeared. My father said my grandfather hid them, but he couldn't tell me where. He died. What a pity for the girl. I feel sorry for the grandfather and the jewelry and the way he's dressed. I think it's probably made up. Because as far as I know, your parents weren't very rich, and if they had something from the queen, they'd probably be better off. Yes, it was a difficult time. My relatives lived through the revolution and the war, so it was probably all lost. Mom came into the room to call them in for dinner. "Dad, stop telling my daughter your stories. I'm sick of it. Let's go to the table, or everything will get cold. I'm telling the truth, and let my granddaughter know about her relatives. By the way, tell me, where is your husband?" "I don't know. He's been working late lately. They say he can't make it there, so he has to stay overnight." "You or Joe's lying. There's no job that's bigger than your family. He's probably got a woman, so he goes to see her. And you, this noodle, which he hangs on your ears, better take it off and check yourself, because you're waiting for him like a fool, while he's having fun with someone else." "What are you talking about? Joe loves me and he loves my daughter, so we're fine. He doesn't love me. You can see it in them. He wanted a son, that's all. I just don't see how it's possible. It doesn't matter if it's a son or a daughter. It's your child, you have to love it. I look at Lily and my heart bleeds. She reaches for her father and he pushes her away. But how can you do that? He just comes home from work tired, and she's like a leech on him all the time, so he gets angry. Woman, how stupid you people are. I'm telling you, but it's no use. As stupid as you were, you're still stupid. Come on, let's eat, you said you'd keep it." May listened and pretended that everything was all right, though she herself began to doubt her husband. When they got married, Joe, but I carried him in my arms, cherished him. And then when their daughter was born, it was like he was changed. He got mean, irritable, always angry, always dissatisfied. May had to go round and round on him, but it didn't help. And he kept pushing his daughter away from him as if she was not his own. "Okay, he'll come today. I'll talk to him," May thought. She watched her grandfather feeding Lily, thinking that he never loved her as much as he loved his granddaughter. They are together all the time, constantly, then in the vegetable garden, then in the garden, then watching soccer together, then just go for a walk. Lily from the grandfather did not move a step away. A child can always sense when he's loved. Joe came home at night at 1 o'clock in the morning. May was awake, realizing that her father was probably right, and he had never stayed out this late before, which meant he had someone after all. She heard him walk into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and began to make a noise with the dishes. "Hasn't the mistress fed you?" Joe shuddered and turned to his wife. "What are you doing up all night?" "Tack here waiting for you, I think. Here's my hubby, and at work is working hard, and he probably have fun. He only comes home to eat and sleep." "Yeah, Joe. Don't talk nonsense. I've been working all right. Or did your father put that shit in your head?" "What's my father got to do with it? You think I'm stupid? That I ain't got no brains? You've changed a lot. You hardly talk to me. We haven't slept together in 3 months. You're saying it's all your fault, Dad? That's enough. I don't want to hear this crap. Something you don't like? Then let's get a divorce, and I'm done. You come home, you want to rest, but you're not the one who starts nagging me. Honestly, I'm sick of it, and I'm sick of it. You can pack your things and go wherever you want, but I'm exhausted. I'm not wooden, I'm alive. Do you understand? I need a husband at home. They are coming something. So you can choose to live in peace with me, or you can go to all four corners. So that's how you talk. All right, I'll do as you say. I'll leave tomorrow. That's fine. And don't try not to. May said it and went to the bedroom. About 5 minutes later, she heard the front door slam. She couldn't take it anymore and sobbed into her pillow. Joe left the house, breathed in the cold air, and went to his mistress Jill's house. She had been proposing to him for a long time to live together, but he wasn't ready yet. Today's display of his spouts had set the stage. He looked at her and realized that he no longer wanted to live with this woman. Everything changed not after the daughter was born, but after Jill said that his May with a neighbor walked, that the daughter is most likely from him, herself saw them together. You think I'm lying to you? You think I'm lying to you? But think about it, he's got 4 daughters, and suddenly you have a daughter. Don't you think it's strange? Why are you talking about? We're neighbors, we're good friends, and just because she talked to him doesn't mean anything. And I'm telling you that they had something going on. Ah, Daddy, that old dude. Oh, Daddy, that old geezer, he's covering for his daughter. Why the hell is he living with you? Doesn't he have his own house? Yes, of course, in another village. That's where I brought May from. I met her there, and I traveled there for work. So we met, and then we got married. May's mom died last year, so she took my dad to live with us, so he wouldn't be so sad. Joe knocked on the door, realizing that Jill was probably asleep by now. "Who's there? What do you want?" she whispered. "Jill, it's me. Can you let me in?" "Joe, is that you? Did you forget something?" "I'm gonna live with you, that's all." "Did your wife kick you out?" "I left." I looked at her and realized I couldn't be with her anymore. All I could think about was that she was with someone else. I can't forgive that. You were right, you can't forgive something like that. Go to bed soon. You have to go to work early tomorrow. You need to rest. May got up early in the morning. She stayed up all night, crying, wondering if she had done the right thing. After all, maybe he was at work. She was jealous of him in the middle of the night. Who could stand it? So Joe got angry. He's gone. But it's all right. He'll come back tonight. I'll talk to him calmly. We'll work it out. Joe's already gone to work. He's a little early today. What do you care? We had a little fight last night and he left. I guess when he gets home from work tonight, we'll talk and everything will be fine. I don't think so, he won't. He's been living with someone else for a long time. The whole village knows about it, except you. So stop feeling sorry for him and looking for excuses. He doesn't love you. That's the whole story. You mean, like with someone else? Dad, you knew everything and didn't say anything? I didn't keep quiet, I told you, but you don't want to listen to anyone either. That's the result. And what about me? How will I live now? It's okay. You're not the first, you're not the last. Women live without men. And you'll live. You're not alone. Look how your daughter's growing up, and I'm here for you. I think everything will be fine. But May was so sick at the thought of me, Joe, living with another woman. It can't be. I mean, they loved each other so much, and it all ended so stupidly, and I didn't know how to get it back. Do you know who he's living with? I don't know. A dyed-up girl, Jill, I think. I came here and the old folks told me he'd been tangled up with her since Lily was born. I thought it was nothing serious at first, but then I realized they'd gotten busy and sooner or later he'd have left. Lily hadn't seen her dad for a week and couldn't figure out where he'd gone. When she asked her mom, she was silent and her grandfather wouldn't say anything. One evening she went out with the children to play hide and seek and saw her daddy walking with some woman. She had seen her before, but she didn't know her name. "Daddy!" Lily shouted and rushed over to him. "What do you want?" her father asked angrily. He looked at his daughter unhappily. "Dad, why don't you come home?" "It's none of your business. Go home and don't you dare come near me, you nigger's brat." Lily cried and ran home, and became very offended that her father did not talk like that, and it was also unclear what the neighbor's brat was. May heard her daughter go home. Her eyes were wet with tears, and she asked, "Daughter, what's wrong? Did someone hurt you?" "Yes, Dad. I ran up to him to find out how he's doing and why he doesn't come to us, and he threw me out and called me names." "What kind of name calling?" Lily repeated this interesting word, of which she only understood the words neighborly. May looked at her daughter incomprehensibly and then shifted her gaze to her father. "I don't understand what he meant by that." "I don't know what he meant. He doesn't think Lily is his daughter. His roommate must have told him something about you. Women, they're all women. They have no peace. I'll see him tomorrow and talk to him. Maybe I'll get it out of his head. But how can you drive your own daughter away from you? Don't, Dad, don't get involved. I'll talk to him myself. If he thinks I cheated on him, I don't need a man like that. Whatever, but this way we can have a man-to-man talk with him. The next day, May went to her husband's workplace to have a serious talk with him. She didn't want him back, but she couldn't forgive him for hurting their daughter. What do you want? Joe asked as she approached him. What did you say to your daughter last night? We barely got her to calm down. What did you mean yesterday? What don't you know? You have a baby with your neighbor, and now you want me to raise her. With who? The neighbor? Are you out of your mind? I've only ever talked to him through the fence. You know, I asked him for strawberry plants and that's it. I never even went to his house, and he came to ours. I don't believe you. You're lying. So you believe the man who slandered me, but you don't believe me, the wife who loved only you? You don't believe me? I'll tell you something. I did the right thing in developing with you. I don't need a husband like you. May turned and walked away. And Joe was back at work when his partner came up to him. Is it true, John? I just overheard you two talking. I'm surprised at all, because everyone here knows that your wife didn't cheat on you with anyone, because we spread rumors like that quickly. Who told you that shit? That's what Jill said. You've got to listen to someone. She's the one who almost slept with the village, and now she wants to get married. You're a good-looking guy, so she did her best. Only you're really stupid. And May, in this sense, I understand. After such a thing, will never accept you. Joe waved it off. He didn't want to change anything now. Everything suited him. Jill surrounded him with such love that he felt he had done the right thing and had no regrets. May came home, went to her room and lay on her bed. She felt very bad. She didn't know how she was going to live her life and what to do. Even this morning, she did not believe in these gossips and thought that her husband would come to his senses and return to her. But now she did not need him, no matter how much she loved him, but she had pride, and she would never forgive him for that. Grandfather, looking at the room where May was, entertained Lily, who wanted to go to her mother, but he did not let her go, telling her in the night what happens to little naughty girls. Grandpa, you make me laugh, but I really want to go to my mom. She's been sad lately. She's just tired and needs to rest. She's just tired. If we go to her place, she won't be able to rest. It's okay. Everything will fall into place soon. You'll see that things will get better for your mom. Jill cooked dinner and thought about Joe. She'd gotten what she wanted. Now the most important thing was to get him to marry her. She wasn't going to go around being a perpetual mistress. She remembered her first love. His name was Cameron. How she loved him, and she thought he loved her too. But it was simpler than that. He just wanted to sleep with her, that's all. After it happened and he took her innocence, he said he didn't want her. Did you think I'd love a girl with a family like yours? And you thought I'd love a girl with a family like yours? Well, no, it's different for everyone. My parents are rich and your mom's an alcoholic, so you and I have nothing in common and will never be together. But Cameron, why would you do that? You could have told me you don't love me and that we're not on the same path. Just for your collection. I've had you for 28 years, you're a loser. Now goodbye. Don't you think I'll change my mind? I don't need you. Jill then very much worried. She, like all girls, dreamed of finding her prince and marry him. But as it turned out, beauty is not enough and that the man is not as good, brave as she had in her dreams. Then there was Justin, who wooed her beautifully, and then when he got his way, just like that he said that they were not on their way, just left. And then she heard he proposed to Sonia, an inconspicuous girl who was a gray mouse to Jill. She took that one hard too. Thought she must be picking the wrong men. Naturally, she's very beautiful, of course. She dreamed of a handsome husband, but it didn't work out. So she should look not at handsome men, with whom she has no luck, but at smart ones. The smart ones, she had a lot of guys whose names she couldn't even remember. It was the saying. They'd go out with her for a while, and then they'd just dump her. She didn't understand why, but they'd get married later, but not to her. And then the village began to go about her bad rumors, but she did not care. She realized that apparently marriage was not for her, so she decided to just go on living her life for the fun of it. She'd been looking at Joe for a long time. He was handsome and smart, but he wouldn't even look in her direction. Then he brought his wife from another village, but to give him credit, she was pretty too, and he married her, but that didn't bother her. She was now a more experienced girl in such matters and did not want to hurry. She reminded herself at this moment of a fox, which is hanging around a rooster to catch it and eat it. In this case, she realized that there was no need to hurry and she would definitely think of something. She was very upset when she saw them walking together to the market one day. He was holding her gently. She was in a position. Jill realized that all was lost and that now Joe would never be with her. And she was so angry that she decided she would do anything to have him with her. And the baby was no obstacle. May had a baby girl and Jill had a chance. She really didn't know what she was going to do next, but hope warmed her soul. And she told herself that this time she would make it work. And it did. Ono once passed by the house where they lived and saw her talking to a neighbor. She came closer and overheard what they were talking about. May was asking him for strawberry plants, nothing special, and she was about to walk on by. But then an interesting thought flashed through her mind and she decided to take a chance. Jill worked in the factory cafeteria, feeding the workers, Joe being one of them. That day she asked him to help and unload boxes of stew. The loader's drunk again, and I can't carry such a heavy load myself. You help Joe, and I'll thank you. Joe didn't suspect a thing. He started carrying the boxes and putting them where Jill showed him. Then, when it was done, she called him into the back room and kissed him. Joe didn't respond to the kiss, pulled back from her and said, "You can't do that, Jill. I'm married. I got a kid growing up. I feel sorry for you. You're such a good man. You need another wife. Not a wife like yours." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I saw your wife making love to your neighbor. It can't be. What are you talking about?" "What affair? What neighbor?" "The usual. I don't have to explain it to you. You're a grown man and you know how it's done. And then think about it, you wanted a son, even though you had a daughter, and your neighbor has 4 girls. That's the result." Joe didn't want to believe it. He was about to leave, but Jill was like a snake, whispering something, saying that he needed to change himself to make his soul feel better. Then it happened. Joe liked it. He started spending every day with Jill. They met at first in the back room. Then he went to her house in the evenings. Everything was going great, only the council wasn't appeased. Only Jill wasn't happy with everything. She really wanted Joe to leave his wife. But the years went by, he still slept with her the same way and went home for the night. That didn't suit her either. She couldn't understand why Joe's wife knew her husband was going out and didn't chase him away. She decided to encourage it, and that after she spread how much in rumors about them that he was fine with the 2 of them, that he was going to marry her. It didn't work right away, but it did. Now he lives at her house. They sleep in the same bed, but that's it. He, as she realized, was not even thinking of marrying her. She decided to push him to this step, because she wanted to live like a normal woman, to also walk down the street with her head proudly raised. True, she had one secret. She would never be able to give birth to him, but he didn't need to know that. When Joe came home, she set the table and decided to have a serious talk with him. "Look, Joe, don't you think it's time you and I thought about us?" "What are you talking about?" "What are you talking about?" "It's time we got married." "How many times?" "I'm a woman. I'm a normal, hardworking woman. You and I are living like lovers, and I don't want that." "Come on, is it bad? What's wrong with that? What's a passport stamp? We're already husband and wife to everyone." "You shouldn't say that. What am I gonna tell our kid if Dad doesn't want a stamp on his passport?" "No, Joe, that's not gonna work. You better think about it, because I don't want to live like this anymore." "Are you pregnant?" "I think so. So I thought I'd get a belly on us and the women would laugh at me. So I thought I'd offer it to you after all. We're having a good time. So what's the matter?" Joe didn't want to marry Jill. He was happy with everything. But when she told him they were having a baby, he decided to apply to the registry office. May came to work and her partner, who worked with her at the pharmacy, asked, "Well, how are you? You're going to your ex-boyfriend's wedding. They're getting married. Did you heard?" "Have you heard?" "I have. And I wish you all the best, but I don't want to go. I'm ashamed of the fact that I once loved that man." Well, the whole village is shocked. Trading you for a girl like Jill, there's no place to test her. Maybe she's got him hooked. I don't believe that. She's just a sly woman, that's all. At first, I thought I'd fight for him. And when she told me that it was me who walked away from him, and that it was me who gave birth to another man's child, that's it. I immediately opened my eyes. I realized I didn't need a man like that. So with Jill, they're the perfect couple. They're perfect for each other. You were right. They found each other. Hey, how's Lily? How's your dad? It's good. My daughter's already in second grade, and my dad's fine. I'm very glad he lives with us. He helps me with my daughter. Thanks to him, she studies well, because they do lessons together and learn poems. And here she was bad at math. He explained everything. Now she's doing math like a nut. That's great. What about Tony? I heard he's been hitting on you. Yeah, he's a smart guy, but I'm not ready for that yet. And I'm afraid to get married a second time. I don't have faith in men anymore. I don't want to get dumped again. But you're not making any sense. Just because you're unlucky with one doesn't mean you'll be unlucky with the next. I don't know, we'll see. Jill and Joe were driving down the street in the wedding car when he saw his ex-wife walking with Tony. They were talking about something, and when he said something to her, laughed merrily. He couldn't understand why, but he felt unpleasant and sad, as if something had been taken away from him. That something was very dear to him. Jill noticed his gaze and immediately leaned over to hug him. Why are you so sad? Today is our day, and I won't let you be sad. Are you upset that we didn't invite your ex-wife? I don't think she would have come herself. Besides, she's got another life now too. Let her enjoy it. Joe felt unpleasant, and Jill thought that May had found an even better option than she had before. Why do people like them always get lucky? I ran around with Tony for a year, and he wouldn't even look at me. And now here's May, and she's walking with him, and she can see they're good together. She looked at her husband again, who was looking sadly out the window. That's all right with me. I'm a married woman now. Let anyone say a bad word about me. I quickly shut them up. There weren't many people at the wedding. They invited more guests, but not all of them showed up. Joe knew why, because his friends didn't approve of his choice, told him he was making a huge mistake, only he didn't listen to anyone. Jill knew the reason for the lack of guests too. She didn't really have any friends. She didn't want to meet her husband's friends, and neither did they want to meet her, because they all knew everything about each other. She realized that it was a miracle that Joe had married her, because if he had refused, she would probably have had to leave the village and look for happiness elsewhere. They partied until 7 p.m., and then the guests began to leave, and Joe remembered with longing that at his and May's wedding there had been many guests, and they had partied for 2 days, but this time I was different. May walking with Tony on her arm was on his mind. For some reason he felt sick at the thought of them being together. Realizing it was selfish, he tried to wash his thoughts down with vodka, but it didn't help much. Jill could see that something was happening to her and was angry with him. You are not paying any attention to me at all. What are you thinking? She asked angrily. About why the hell you're wearing a veil. Don't you know it's for innocent girls? And you're a woman and you're acting like a girl all over the place. It's my wedding. What I want to wear, you can wear. I forgot to ask you. What's wrong with you today? You don't seem happy. Think about our son, who's gonna be born soon, and you'll feel better. Joe, have another drink and sigh. A baby's a great thing, and the son's a great thing. You're right, honey. I'm sorry. I've been tired lately. We've been preparing for the wedding for days, so I'm exhausted. So I'm sorry. It's okay. I get it. I'm tired of all this. Let's probably go home. It's almost time for everyone to leave anyway. Tony was already thinking about asking May to marry him. She had been much kinder to him lately, smiling at him when he came to see her and even inviting him to her house. He was already acquainted with her father and Lily, who happily ran to meet him with a shout, "Uncle Tony, hello." It was really scary that she would refuse him, but then, thinking that if she was still thinking about her husband, it was now the past. This Joe did the stupidest act of his life, married Jill. Everyone in the village was still in shock, and she, of course, was a good woman, got her way, caught the fool in her own net. He didn't realize what happiness she was with him all the time. He traded gold for copper, but he hadn't realized it yet. And he didn't want to rub May the wrong way, nor so he decided not to put it off, but to talk not tonight. It had been 4 months since the wedding, and Joe was beginning to look more closely at his wife. He remembered when May was expecting a baby. She was already showing a tummy then and was nauseous all the time. And Jill was walking around like nothing had happened and hadn't gained a gram of weight. Jill, how are you doing? How are you doing? How's our son in the tummy doing? I just look at you and I wonder why you're still the same and your belly's not growing. It's just my body shape. My gynecologist said it's fine and that you won't see your belly until you're 8 months pregnant. I see, but then I see if the doctor said so, it must be true. Jill bit her lip and went into the kitchen. In her happiness as a married woman, she had forgotten all about the baby. And now she had to think of something to make a play so that her husband would not guess anything. Joe was walking home from work when he saw Sarah walking towards him. She was a neighbor, his parents, and he knew from childhood. She worked as a gynecologist at the township hospital. "Hello, how are you?" "Hello, how are you?" "Hello, Joe, I'm doing great." "Hello, I think you're doing great too. I heard you got married for the second time." "Married? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. How's my Jill? How's my son? Is everything okay with them? I'm a little confused. What does Jill and my son have to do with it? What are you trying to tell me?" "What do you mean?" "What do you mean?" "She's having a baby with me. She said she's having a son. So I'm asking you how they're doing because I know you're a great gynecologist and you know your stuff." "Now I understand. So I'll tell you what, thank you for the compliment. And as an excellent gynecologist inform you that Jill is not pregnant because that can't happen. She's infertile." "What? How's that?" "That's how it happens." "Well, how can I tell you this? That can't happen. Maybe you just don't know. Jill told me herself that everything's fine. Maybe she's seeing another doctor, but maybe she's going to another town. I don't know about that. I've told you everything I know. So I'm sorry, Joe, but there's nothing I can do to help you." Joe said goodbye and went home. He didn't want to see Jill. He realized that he needed to think it over, to accept the idea and to understand why she had deceived him so much. He decided to stop by his friend's house that he had been friends with since high school. After he married Jill, they had stopped talking altogether because his wife and his friend couldn't stand each other. "Come on in. What's wrong with you? You look sad." "I met Sarah. She told me some things, and here she is, digesting the information. Only I'm not getting anywhere yet. I can't believe Jill tricked me. I can't believe Jill tricked me. I can't believe she tricked you. I mean, it's cheating too. You're the only one who's gonna believe that bullshit. And now you're doubting it. We all told you then that she's not who she says she is. You know it well, but we still don't understand what happened to you. You think she lied to me about May too. You were an asshole. Of course she did. She just needed you. She did. That's all. I don't know, I guess you got a little weak, so she got you. So just hang in there, you'll see what happens." "What am I supposed to do now?" "Live, you married her. She's your wife now, so get over it and move on." "But I can't. And then I can't get May out of my head. I can't stop thinking about her. She was faithful to me, and I fell into a trap like a fool. I finally realized it, but it's too late. Tony proposed. She's probably gonna say yes, so you're out of luck." "What proposal?" "You were just saying the same thing over and over again." "How? What am I gonna do? How am I gonna live my life? Be a man, you made a mess. Now you have to clean it up. And you know my advice to you. Don't get involved with May. You've hurt her so badly, she'll never forgive you. But it's okay for her to get married too. She'll live a normal life in love and peace. You live your life as you want, but don't mess with her. We'll see about that. I know she loves me and I'll bring her back. She'll be my wife again. Jill's got it all figured out. She'll tell you she slipped on the stairs and fell and lost the baby. It's a good thing she didn't hurt herself. She could have broken her neck. She took makeup and drew black shadows under her eyes, as if she was very ill and barely alive. Then she lay down on the bed and chose a pose for a long time, so that it was not only believable, but also beautiful. Then, after a little thought, she just decided to lie on her side, encompass her belly, and snuggle into the pillow. Joe walked into the house, made his way to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and went into the bedroom. Realizing that Jill was probably in there, he saw her lying on the bed with her arms wrapped around him. "Jill, is something wrong?" He heard crying and sat down next to her to see what had happened. Jill turned her face wet with tears to him and began to tell him what had happened to her. After she finished her story, she looked at her husband, expecting him to pull up, but he was like a stone statue. He was silent and didn't say a word, apparently in shock at what had happened, she thought, and added in a low voice, "But it's okay, honey. Don't worry. The doctor told me that I need to wait a year and then you can get pregnant again. I think you're okay with that. Sarah is such a sensitive doctor. She told you the right thing. I saw her today. She told me something too, that you'll never give birth to me in a year. She probably didn't want to tell you that so you wouldn't be upset, yes? I don't know what you're talking about. You know what you're saying. You know what I'm saying. Just tell me why you lied to me. You couldn't tell me the truth, but I'm not lying to you. She's the one who's been telling you shit. You're blaming me for everything now? Yes, everything. One more thing, I took a DNA test to find out whose daughter Lily is. And what do you think they told me? How's that? Do you know how much that procedure costs? So you just gave money to know that your daughter is yours. You should have bought me a fur coat with that money. And then Jill realized she blurted it out. She shrank back and quieted down. She was swept away by all her cobwebs that she had been weaving around Joe, now shattered in an instant. And now she was focused, looking for a way out of this situation. Yes, Jill, you thought this through beautifully. Well done. There's no telling. Let me tell you something. Did you really think the truth wouldn't come out? You didn't think it through once. Are you going to tell me something now? Why are you saying anything? I see. Then I'll speak for you. I'm going to file for divorce tomorrow. You're not my wife anymore. Joe, don't you understand? I love you. I love you more than my life. That's why I did it. I couldn't stand to see you in pain with another woman. So I decided to pack it up. I just saw your wife talking to that neighbor of yours. That's what came to mind. Well, we were happy, weren't we? We were good. You're crazy. But how could you think of such a thing? Don't you realize I have a daughter growing up there and her father abandoned her? I'll never forget how he pushed her away. And she cried and ran home. May came to see me the next day and I was rude to her then too. All because of you. What have you done, Jill? But I'm sorry, you fool. I told you I couldn't live without you. So I did all that. Just don't leave me, Joe. And I can't take it. I can't live without you and I can't breathe without you. I'll die without you if you leave me and my life will be over. Wait a minute, Jill. What do you expect me to do? Stay with you after everything you've said? Joe, you're not listening to me. I did it all for you, to make you a happy man. You're not happy with me, are you? Do you remember what you used to say to me all the time? I remember everything, and I didn't love that man of yours because you couldn't believe the nonsense I told you about her so easily. If you had loved me, you would have checked it out and found out I was lying. But you didn't do that and you abused her, slept with me. You came home to your wife and didn't hide the fact that you had another woman. Because I'm an idiot. But now I'm gonna make it right. I'll do anything to get her back. You won't. Tony proposed that she's not stupid. She'll say yes. He's such a great guy. And I spent a year on him myself. But he didn't fall for any of my tricks. So I left him alone. She won't marry him, do you hear me? Never. Never. She's mine and I'm not giving her away. Well, we'll see about that. Wipe your snot and listen to me carefully. You won't get a divorce, do you understand? Now let's go to the kitchen. I'll feed you. You're probably hungry from work. Fuck you. Joe shouted to her and went to the exit. He went outside, not knowing where to go. His feet carried him to the house where he heard his daughter laughing. Apparently, she was playing with her grandfather again, although the girl was already big, probably in the 4th grade. What an idiot he is. He lost his family, but nothing. I'll do anything to get it all back. Jill walked around the house wondering what she should do. She could see that Joe was serious and that he would probably go and file for divorce. And if he divorced her, she'd have to leave, because she'd be the laughingstock of the village. No, I'll think of something, but he won't get rid of me that easily. I've wasted all these years trying to get him for nothing. I've got to do something. I've got to talk to Tony to keep him away from Joe and get him to marry her sooner. Then she'll get it right again. He'll have nowhere else to go and he'll come back to her. May watched Lily looking at the crossword puzzle with her grandfather, and she smiled, but her thoughts were far away. She was thinking about Tony's proposal, and she didn't know what she should do. As a man, she liked him. He was handsome, strong, and smart, as women more often said. We were behind him like a stone wall. But her heart told her that this was not her man and that she would not be happy with him. She tried in every way not to think about Joe, but all the time looking at her daughter, remembered him. She realized that he would probably never come back to her. He had married a friend and they were happy. She still waited like a fool for some miracle. She dreamed that one day he would come to her, tell her that he couldn't live without her and without their daughter. And there she would look at her father and think that if that happened, her dad would be against them getting together. And filled how angry he was at Joe, calling her all kinds of names and saying he's a wimp. I'm not a man. Tony was driving to work when he saw Jill standing in the road, waving at him to stop. What does this one want? He grumbled unhappily. Tony, hi. I'm sorry to stop you like this, but I need to talk to you. Aren't you ashamed? You're a married woman and you're back to your old self. I told you we'll never be together. I don't even want to touch you. You're doing it again? Did you finish your fiery speech? I said serious talk. Let's go somewhere where we can't be seen together. He realized something was really wrong. I'm not bickering anymore. I started my car and drove towards the river. It's early in the morning. There shouldn't be anyone there. When they arrived and he turned off the engine, he asked, "But what's wrong? Speak." "Listen, do you like May?" "May? What May?" "Don't be stupid. You have a lot of them." "Yes, I do." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "You've said you proposed." "Did she say yes?" "No, she took a week to think about it." "No, she's a good girl. She doesn't do anything in a hurry. She thinks things through before she makes a big decision. I respect her for that." "Why?" "Joe's just dumping me, trying to get his ex-wife back. You know what I'm saying?" "I don't get it. What's the big deal?" "It's a long story, so let's not waste time on it." "Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I need to know what to prepare for. So tell me I'm in no hurry. I'm in my job as boss. I have the right to be late." Jill started her story from the beginning. She told Tony in detail how she'd won Joe over and what made him marry her. "You were a strange woman. What were you thinking? A year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And then what? You would have needed a child. And what would you do? Don't you know me? You think of something, taken from an orphanage. There's plenty of options if you wanted one so badly. You better tell me what to do. I don't think I can do it alone." "Saw it, I get it. And you know, I have a plan, but you have to stick to it." "Got it. No amateurishness, just strictly according to my plan." "Yeah, and I'll organize everything. Now let's go. I have to get ready too." May was on her way home from work when Tony pulled up in front of her. She smiled, and I got into his car. He handed her a huge bouquet of red roses, smiled and said, "Listen, May, it's been getting pretty sad lately. Here's what I was thinking. Maybe you take a vacation. You and I and Lily go to the sea. We'll go on vacation. How would you like that?" "No, Tony, I can't do that. No, I remember what you asked me and that you're waiting for an answer. And I don't know what to tell you yet. I just don't want to rush you. I'm asking you to come with me for a vacation. I promise that everything will be very decent. Well, you know me, and there you and I can get to know each other even more." "But that doesn't seem right. I mean, I know we'd go as husband and wife, but you're a single man, and I'm single, and suddenly we're going to the sea together. What will she and people say then?" "May, it's obvious to everyone that you're worried. They know that you and I are the bride and groom. Right? The whole village is waiting for you to say yes. Let them think you said yes, and we're just going on vacation. Besides, as far as I know, you went to the doctor yesterday, and what did he say?" "Yeah, not feeling well lately. He said I need less stress, more positive thoughts, that's all. You see, you need to rest, so don't worry about anything and just go. And just go. And Lily will love it. She's never seen the sea before." "Tony, I need to think. Let me talk to my dad, and I'll do what he says." All right, sweetheart. And most importantly, I can't think about you being unhappy anymore. I need you to be the happiest woman I know." Joe's partner ran up to Joe and said, "Listen, Jill's in the hospital. They say she's in serious condition." "What happened?" "I don't know." "Well, you go over there. You're her husband. Find out what happened." "I won't go. I don't trust her anymore. She's deceived me more than once, so let her clean up her own mess." "But you can't do that. She's a woman." "You can't do that either. Besides, nobody forced you to get married. You agreed to marry her yourself. You played her wedding. Why should you blame it all on her? If it's to be blamed, it's both of them." "You were right. I'm not myself today. I'm confused. I don't know what to do. When I found out that she lied to me first, when she told me that the daughter wasn't mine, that Minnie and I got her pregnant, then she told me she was pregnant, and I found out she couldn't have kids, I was totally freaked out and confused. So you should have listened to people and not Jill. We'd all told you May couldn't have fooled you. but you didn't listen to anybody. For you, your Jill was telling the truth. Now you gotta figure out what's next. Now get to the hospital. The foreman's let you go." Joe went into the room and saw Jill, who was very pale, that he was scared out of his wits. "What happened to you? How did you end up here?" "Just when you left last night, I had a heart attack." "Yeah. Good thing the neighbor came by in time to call an ambulance. I probably wouldn't be alive if she hadn't." "Joe, please don't leave me. I've done everything I could to make us happy. Think about it. If you want to, let's get out of here so we don't have anything to remind us of the past. How about it? Do you agree? Besides, my doctor says I need a change of climate. Why don't we leave?" "I don't know, Jill. I don't know anything right now. It's just, I can't live with you after what you've done. You're the one who lied to me, and I was a fool to believe you. And now it's over. I don't love you, but I've never loved you. I just wanted to hurt my wife, that's all. But she's stronger than me. She's been raising her daughter all these years and keeping men away from her. Only I realized it too late, but she'll probably marry this Tony guy. Probably. I heard they're taking the whole family to the seaside together. Maybe you and me, when I get out of hospital, we'll go too." "What about the sea when they go?" "I don't know if you're so worried about it. Go and find out." Joe ran out of the room and ran down the hospital corridor. Only one thought was beating in his head, not to let him go along for the ride, because he realized that then May would be lost forever and she would never come back to him. Jill threw back the blanket and jumped off the bed. "He didn't care about me. He went after that quiet girl of his. But what was it about him that attracted him so much? What's wrong with me that's wrong with her? It's like a magnet. I can't do anything about it. I wish they'd go away already. Otherwise I'd lose my husband and Tony, and then I'd lose my May, who makes him drool. I wonder what it is about her that makes them so hungry for her." Joe ran to May's house and forgot to knock, went in, and she was sitting at the table and writing something, and she looked up at him surprised, and then asked, "What do you want here? Why have you come here?" He fell on his knees in front of her and said, "May, please forgive me. It's my fault. It's only now that I realize I love you more than my life, and that everything about you wasn't true. Please forgive me, because I can't live without you. You were too late, Joe. I'll never take you back, and your daughter's long since forgotten about you. The day you pushed her away from you. I'm done. I just realized you're not a good man, and I'm telling you again, you and I will never have anything more. So please leave our family alone and be happy now. I don't need you." "May, don't say that. I know none of this is true. You still love me because we're two halves of the same whole. I made a huge mistake, and you have no idea how sorry I am. Please don't send me away. I feel so bad without you. I don't want to talk to you anymore, so get out of the house, I beg you." Joe realized it was useless to insist now. You would still have to fight for her. He knew that now he wouldn't rest until he got it again in me. After Joe left, the peace of mind that man had tried for so many years to reestablish left her. She looked sadly at the door Joe had just walked through, and thought that she had done the right thing in not agreeing to go to the sea with Tony, and she wasn't going to marry him. She realized she didn't need anyone but Joe. Yes, he was confused. Yes, he'd done wrong, but he was remorseful, and she could see it in his eyes. Tony went to Jill's house and asked, "Can you tell me why the hell you left the hospital? I had such a hard time getting you admitted. I come in and they tell me you've gone home. What the hell are you doing?" Jill looked at him, poured herself a glass of vodka and drank it in one gulp. "At nothing, he doesn't care about me and how I feel. Enough, I'm tired, I can't take it anymore. You can't have a man who doesn't feel anything for you. It's my fault for starting all this, so that's enough. I'll wash my hands of it. You can go ahead if you want, but my advice to you is that it's useless. It's not for me, but I'm gonna get what I want, and I'm not gonna let Joe get in the way of that. All right, I'll do it without your help." He left and Jules stared at the closed door, but little did she realize that he wouldn't succeed because those two loved each other and would be together. Lily and Grandpa came home from fishing and saw Mom sitting at the table crying. "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you crying while we were out with Grandpa? Did someone hurt you?" "No, my dear. Everything's fine, but it's just something I remembered. I get like this sometimes too. When I remember something sad, I want to cry." "Where is it that you have such a thing?" Grandfather looked carefully at his daughter and then shook his head. "No, I don't have such things. And you, daughter, tell me what happened." Joe came and said that he loved her and that he was sorry for what he had done. He wants to get back together with him. What did you do? I kicked him out and told him I'm doing great and I'm getting married. What are you doing? Good for you. He's got no business here. Enough. He's made all the girls suffer. And about Tony, if you feel something for him, then go out, and if not, then honestly admit it to him. He's not a bad guy, he's mean, but that's okay. But he's not a slob. May decided not to postpone the conversation with Tony, if before this day she still had doubts. Now the doubts are all gone and at heart was very good and calm. He as usual came to her in the evening with a huge bouquet of flowers. She took the flowers and put them next to the bench. She didn't invite him inside today because she planned to have a serious talk with him. You seem strange today. Is something wrong? I just thought I'd give you an answer. I just decided to give you an answer. I thought long and hard, and I realized I don't love you, Tony. You're a very good man, a wonderful friend, but that's it. I can't be your wife because I don't have any feelings for you. I realize I don't want to cheat on you anymore. You pulled me out of my ennui, tried to entertain me somehow, and you succeeded. I'm living and enjoying life again, but that's it. So you're turning me down? I don't want to deceive you. I don't want to deceive you. If there's no love, there won't be love. I didn't believe in that old saying, we'll get along, we won't get along, we won't get along. And you need another woman. Strong, powerful, not like me. How can you know what kind of woman I need? Just because you looked into my soul. You don't even know me and you're already telling me the kind of woman I want. I thought you were smarter than that. But as I see now, I was wrong. I know why you turned me down. Because Joe was on the horizon. But if you're determined not to lie to me, am I right? He came to see me, that's true, but that doesn't mean anything because I kicked him out. He did. But she kicked him out. Well, she kicked him out. And then she sat there sobbing and wondering if you were too hard on him and if he'd come back after what you told him. Am I right? May sat there, dead or alive. Tony was telling her everything she'd really felt when the door closed behind Joe. No, it wasn't like that. I started making excuses. I realized she's lying to him and to herself now. Okay, I get it. You're a woman of character and you don't forgive a traitor. And I'm really glad because we won't be very disappointed if after what he did to you, you take him back. Then I'm off. I don't dare bother you anymore. Tony left, and May began to sit on the bench outside the house, and somehow she felt ashamed that she had told him the wrong thing. All she'd ever wanted was for Joe to come back to her. She'd forgotten what they'd had before. Just seeing him made her body ache because she wanted to feel his hands on her body again. Joe walked and thought about the fact that he had nowhere to go. He had left his home to May when he left, even though Jewel had resented it. At first, she told him to bend them over. She wanted them to go to her house, but he didn't want to listen to anything because he realized that May had a job here and Lily went to kindergarten. Besides, she was already used to it. Of course, he realized that he would go crazy if they left here and he never saw them again. He decided to walk down his street and look at his house from the outside to hear Lily's laughter, May's laughter, Grandpa's bass voice telling them something as always. As he approached, he saw someone sitting on a bench. He realized it was May. Hi, are you doing something alone in the dark? Hi, I'm just sitting here, looking at the stars. What are you doing out at night? Nothing else to do. I just don't have anywhere else to go. I left Jill when I found out the truth. She lied to me about you too, but I believed her. Now I don't know where I'm gonna live. Well, I don't know what to think. Let's go home, it's your home too. May, I need to know, have you forgiven me? I need to know, because I realized I love you and our daughter, and I want to be together again. I forgave you a long time ago, but you didn't expect my father and daughter to forgive you right away. So just be patient, okay? I understand, of course. The important thing is that we're together. I can handle the rest. They went home. The house was quiet. They must have been asleep. They went quietly into May's bedroom and closed the door. In the morning, as the grandfather and granddaughter were marching merrily in the kitchen, smells came from there as well. They ran into Joe, who at this time had washed up outside and now also came into the house for breakfast. Hello, father. Hello, daughter. How are you two doing? How's the mood? It was fine until I saw you, Grandpa muttered, and then looked into the kitchen and said to Mai, come on, daughter, we're going to talk. May stepped away from the stove, took off her apron, and followed her father. She was ready to talk and knew what she would say to her father. Meanwhile, Joe winked at Lily and said, "Will you feed your father? You are not my father, but a stranger, so if you want to eat, then eat, but I will not sit at the same table with you." May stood in front of her father, all red with anger and angry that he could not understand her. "I love him, do you understand? And I don't need anyone else. He's Lily's father, we're family, and I can't kick him out of his own house." "Wow, since when did he become so honorable? And I forgot what he did to you. You were walking like death. It was like your soul was taken out." "Dad, it's in the past." "Well, it's in the past. It's okay now. We've made up. We've forgiven each other." "I wonder why he forgave you. What kind of offense did you cause him?" "Dad, don't use words. It's just that it's all in the past now, and I've decided that Joe's gonna live with us again." "That's what you've decided? Good. Then I'm gonna pack up my things and go home to my place. Do you understand me? I don't want to live in the same house with that man. I told you to leave, but you blamed it on little Lily, that she's fine here, that she's used to it. And now I get it. You just didn't want to get away from him, because I loved him all the time." "Dad, don't be angry. You have to understand me too." "Dad, I can't help it. I love him very much." "So love him. I'm not going to watch this. I'm leaving tonight. I hope you'll let Lily come to me on vacation. She's big enough to come on her own." "Dad, don't be silly, but you'll do something alone. Come live with us. You and Joe used to get along so well." "Yeah, until he did something like this. I'll tell you something now. I probably don't love him enough to forgive him for what he did." That afternoon, Grandpa left, and Lily sat in her room and cried bitterly. She couldn't bear to look at that Joe. She saw Mama looking at him tenderly, running around trying to please him. Meanwhile, she remembered perfectly well how he turned her down and how they'd come to their senses afterward for a long time after all that. May was happy. She'd forgotten all about her daughter and hadn't noticed the vacation had come. She packed up and went to her grandfather's house. Hearing from Lily, "Then my character does not give up, does not talk to me like that. By the way, you know she's gone." "Yes, when I went to their room, there was a note on the table. I realized she'd gone to her grandfather's. Let her stay there, and then she'll come back and I'll talk to her, okay?" "Good, because I feel like I'm in the wrong all the time. She's my daughter, and yet she's a complete stranger to me." "Nothing, she's just grown up. She's showing her character, proudly carrying the banner of Marxism. But nothing, everything will get better, I promise you." "I hope so. And you know that we are now in the house completely alone and can do whatever we want." Smiling, Joe asked his wife. "I like the way you think." She smiled back, took his hand and led him into the bedroom. Grandpa couldn't believe his eyes when he saw a smiling Lily on the threshold. "Hello, how are you?" "Granddaughter, my darling, I'm fine. I missed you so much, I was waiting for you to come. I went to register the house, I signed it over to you. So it's your inheritance now. Remember, if things get hard, come here, you'll be safe. Do you understand me?" "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" "I'm just saying. Believe me, I'm an old man. I've lived a lot on this earth, and I know how hard it can be for all of us. But I don't make the mistake I made. And your mother. If a person betrayed once, he will betray the second time without hesitation." "You think so?" "I think they're in perfect harmony, like two inseparable parrots. Always together. I'm getting kind of excited myself. Maybe you're wrong, Gramps. Maybe this Joe isn't such a bad guy after all. You never said people make mistakes. You should give them a second chance. Maybe you're not always right, but maybe you're right. I just don't believe him. I can't help it. I just don't believe him." May left the store and went home happily. She thought that now she would cook a delicious dinner and meet her husband in a new dress. She had not bought anything for a long time, and now she decided to make him happy with her new dress. She saw Jill walking towards her. She crossed the road not to say hello to this deceiver, but Jill was not confused, followed her, and then when they came closer together, she said, "You don't be happy about your happiness for long. Joe will be mine again. You'll see he'll come running to me, because he told me then that you're boring in bed, and he's a man who wants variety. And you don't deceive yourself, because since that time I've wised up and I can please my husband myself. Good for you, but I'm warning you, he'll still be mine." May came home and threw her bags on the floor. Her mood had soured, and she didn't feel like doing anything. She went to the bedroom, changed her clothes, and went to the kitchen. She didn't feel like cooking, so she decided to heat up what was left of lunch for dinner. Soon Joe came in. He washed his hands and made his way into the kitchen. After May put a plate in front of him, he looked at her face and realized something was wrong. "So tell me what's up." May told him who she met and when she left the store and what their conversation was about. "Somebody to listen to." "Yeah, it's Jill. She can tell you things." "Come on. I love you. I don't need anyone else." May calmed down. At night, when she was asleep, Joe got up quietly and went into the kitchen. Today's conversation reminded him of Jill. He remembered how good he had been with her and realized he missed her too. I'd have to visit her sometime, find out how she was doing, what she was up to, because I hadn't heard from her at all. And we are not strangers. We'd have lived together for so many years. The vacation was coming to an end. Lily looked longingly at her grandfather, and she didn't want to leave him. There was some unpleasant feeling that she was seeing him for the last time, and it was tearing her heart. "Grandpa, can I come with you? I'll transfer here from school. I don't want to leave you alone." "Don't be silly, granddaughter. I'm fine, you see. You've improved my health. We've been outdoors all the time, fishing every morning. So until the next vacation I'm enough, I'll be waiting for you." Jill washed the dishes, put the cups nicely, and was about to go into the room when there was a knock at the window. It was already dark, and she was very surprised because she didn't understand who could come to her at this hour. After Joe had left her, she had stopped seeing men. She was tired. Realizing that no one wanted to get married, everyone just wanted a woman to feed, water, and put to bed. And that didn't suit her. "Who's there?" "It's me, Jill. Are you posting?" "Yeah." Jill opened the door and couldn't believe her eyes. Joe stood in front of her with a huge bouquet of roses. He smiled and asked, "So what's it going to be? Are you gonna let me in, or are we gonna talk at the door?" She stepped away from the door, showing him that he could come in. "Why are you fighting? I said a lot of things to your wife. She must have been offended, complained to you." "You complained she was offended, but when I heard about you, I was so upset that words can't even describe it. So I thought I'd pay you a visit. Do you mind?" "No, because I can't stop thinking about you." "So I thought you'd gone away. I don't hear from you. I don't see you. What do you do?" "What do you do?" "I work in a store as a merchandiser, and I left the factory because I got tired of feeding impudent men who are always getting under my skirt. Now I have a quiet job. I watch the goods. Nobody sees me, and I don't want to see anybody." "You've changed, Jill. You've changed. And you know, I like you better that way. As time goes on, we get smarter. Joe, tell me what you want from me and get out of here. I gotta go to work. Don't you see why I'm here? I want to reminisce about old times. Don't you want to remember them?" I said, "That's it. I don't want anything. I don't want anything. Let's see. If I kiss you and you tell me to leave, I'll leave immediately and never come back. And if it's the other way around, then we might have something." May couldn't figure out where Joe was lingering. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning and he still hadn't shown up. Then the front door slammed and she saw her husband on the doorstep. "Where have you been so long? I was beginning to worry." "Let's go to the kitchen. I'll tell you everything. Listen, we've been offered a hack job, but you can only work at night, you know? But I'll earn so much money that we've never dreamed of. We'll buy a car, get you and your daughter a fur coat. You'll be my queens." "Listen, Joe, that's a lot of work. How are you going to work during the day?" "May, don't you know me? I'd do anything for you, so don't worry. Besides, it won't take long. I think we can do it in a month, and then we'll see. Listen, feed me, please. I'm so hungry and sleepy, because I have to get up early for work tomorrow." May fussed, feeling calm again. She began to feed her husband, realizing how much she loved him after all. Lily came home and sadly told her mother how good it was with her grandfather and how she did not want to leave him. "Nothing, your father and I will choose a time. We will go to him and talk to us to come back again." "We and my dad? Sounds ridiculous. By the way, where is he? Time's a long time. He should have gotten home from work a long time ago." "Yeah, he and the guys took some hack job to make some extra money, and soon we bought a car. We'll change your clothes. That's what he does. He works nights. I wonder who he's working with, because me and the girls passed him by. His whole crew is there. It's someone's birthday, I think." May tensed. An unpleasant chill ran down her spine, but she didn't jump to conclusions because she realized that it was quite possible that her husband was just going to the bathroom at that time, and Lily might not have seen him. When he got home, she would be sure to check with him. But right now, she wasn't going to spoil her mood. Jill was happy. For almost a month now, Joe had been coming to her, giving her gifts, telling her he loved her. She tried not to rush things, realizing that it was the rush and everything that ruined her then. But now she had wised up. She would bide her time, not make scandals, not asking why, for example, he didn't come or something like that. Let his May go crazy, but she wouldn't. Now she would definitely not let her own go, and sooner or later Joe would stay with her. May sat in the kitchen, looking tensely at the clock. Time was running out. Joe was still gone, and she began to worry, thinking that her father was probably right, and he was up to his old tricks again. "Where have you been so long?" she asked as soon as Joe appeared on the doorstep. "May, you're at it again. I told you, I've been working." "And who did you work with today, for example?" Joe looked at his wife, realizing there was a catch in the question. He remembered how the guys called him to the cafe to celebrate a colleague's birthday, and he didn't go because he had a meeting with May. Owen was working because everyone was at the birthday party. I approached them at the end, congratulated them, but I didn't drink because it's already late, and tomorrow they'll all work, and I'll rest at home. That you were worried for nothing. Let's go to bed. Because I'm very tired. May calmed down, hugged her husband, and they went to the bedroom together. The days went on for days. Lily was already in 11th grade and went to her grandfather's house again for the vacations. May also worked at the pharmacy, and Joe worked at the factory. Today was her friend's birthday. The girls came over. They had closed at lunchtime to celebrate. They talked about their men, who was unhappy with what? May couldn't take it anymore. "There's a lot going on at the factory. They promised to raise wages, but they don't raise them, and our men are working. But they pay me only money, and they feed me breakfast all the time. I'm already telling my husband to look for another job, but he doesn't want to. He says he's used to it. It's strange, but they did raise wages at the factory. My neighbor can't get enough of it. They say they're getting good wages now. So you're confused, May. I heard the conversation myself." "I don't get it. You're the one who's confused." "All right, I'll find out for myself. The chief accountant from the factory is coming to see us, so I'll ask her, and then we'll see who's confusing what." That day, May must have been affected by alcohol, because she soon forgot all about this conversation. In the evening, when she came home from work, she did not wait for her husband, because she could hardly stand on her feet. She went to bed and immediately fell asleep. She didn't know what time her husband came home from work. Jill was happy. She could see that Joe was attracted to her, and that every night after work, he went not home to his wife, but to her. So her plan was paying off. She was still behaving the same way with him. She didn't insist that he come, but she didn't kick him out either. And if he wanted to leave earlier, she didn't tell him anything. And if he stayed for a long time and was genuinely happy about it. Joe himself couldn't understand what was happening to him. He remembered how he wanted to get back to his wife, but he was drawn to Jill. She had changed a lot. She had become gentle, kind, always happy to see him. Coming home, he fed stories to his wife, saying that they are in a complete mess at work now, but soon everything will settle down and then you will come earlier. She believed his stories, thinking that he wouldn't deceive her anymore, because they had agreed that they would never lie to each other. May arrived at work as usual, put on her robe, and walked to her room to make herself some coffee. Kate came in and gave her a weird look. "Hey friend, why are you looking at me so strangely? Is something wrong?" "Yeah, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to ask you a question. Is everything okay with your husband?" "Yeah. Joe and I are great. Yeah. Why do you ask?" "There's a rumor going around the village that he's getting involved with our Jill again, giving her expensive gifts, visiting her at night. You haven't noticed anything strange, have you?" May felt cold. She wanted to say something, but she didn't have time because the phone rang. She picked up the phone. Listening. Mom, Grandpa died today at the hospital. Come over." She heard her daughter's sobbing voice. May rushed to her bag and took off her robe. "Where? What happened?" "Kate, my dad's dead. I gotta go. So you work today, and tomorrow call someone for a shift, because I probably won't be here for a few days." "Oh, I gotta go. Lily's gonna go crazy alone. She loved her grandfather so much." "I'll go. I'll just tell my husband if he'll come with me. It'll be easier for me." Yeah, sure, go ahead. Don't worry, everything will be fine here. When the door closed behind May, Kate said, "But wow, such a good broad. What these men can't get enough of, they still look left." When Joe was told that his wife was waiting at the gatehouse, he realized that she had probably found out about everything. He didn't want to go because he didn't want to lose May, but the men were already hinting to him that the whole village knew that he was seeing Jill again, so she had found out. He sighed and went to her. On the way, he thought about what to say for himself. She stood there in tears and just looked at him. "May, I'm so sorry, I'm. Daddy's dead. Can you get off work and come with me? But make it quick, because you're there? All alone." "Sure, honey. I'll do it right away, and I'll get the money. I'll be right back, honey. Everything's gonna be okay." He ran happily down the hall. He was happy that his wife still had no idea. He had to be very careful from now on and make sure that there were fewer rumors and that they weren't talked about anymore. Lily was painful to look at. She had lost a lot of weight and gauntness over the days. She told her mother that the girl had gotten sick and he had been taken to the hospital. She visited him, brought him vitamins, and cooked something delicious for him. He went on the mend and began to feel much better. Then early one morning, she got a call that he had died. "Ma, how am I going to live without Grandpa now? Because I have no one more dear to me than him." "What about me?" "You have me, Dad. We have a family. You're not alone." "No, Mom, you don't notice how this man has replaced me and your father. You're with him all the time, and you don't remember me from time to time. I'm used to having no one else but my grandfather." May's heart snapped and became so painful from the words of her daughter that she did not know what to say, just sat down to be able to heart it. "Mom, are you sick?" "No, I'm fine. It's just everything just kind of piled up. I didn't think my father would die because I never came to see him, never visited him once. I need to get the documents reissued. It's an inheritance after all. Grandpa did it a long time ago. He signed it over to me. He said the house is mine now. He's always thought of everything. Then fine, let it be as he decided." After the funeral in the evening, they sat at grandfather's house and drank tea. Joe looked at the house and said, "I propose to sell it, that it will stand here, for there is no need to travel here now. Let's go to a realtor tomorrow. He'll help us sell it." "No, it's my house and I'm not going to sell it. Let's keep it as it is." "No, Grandpa told me I can't sell it, so I'll do what he told me." "Lily, do what you want. I just suggested it, and if Grandpa said so, then we're not going to touch anything. Calm down. When will you finally realize that I'm your father and I love you very much? And you don't need to see me as an enemy. You don't love anyone else but yourself. Not your mom, not me." "Why are you saying?" "Dad admitted his mistakes, so now he has to be reminded of them for the rest of his life." "Mom, but how can you not see that he is a bad man? You yourself 100 times regret that took him back." Lily didn't have time to say anything because May slapped her. It was the first time she had hit her child in so long. Lily looked hatefully at her and then at Joe, who pretended nothing was happening and left the room. May looked after Lily and couldn't understand what was going on with her lately. She looked at Joe, who was silently pretending to drink tea. "It's nothing, it'll pass. She just got a bit carried away and I couldn't listen to any more of it. Well, I'll go too, I'm exhausted." The next day they left. Lily didn't talk, and May didn't insist. If she wanted to, let her sulk at her. It's just that she's still a child and should watch her words. Joe walked May and Lily home and said he had to go to work to find out from the guys how things were going. He ran to the flower store, bought some flowers, and went to Jill's house. He missed her terribly all these days, and he couldn't wait to see her. He forgot about everything, even the fact that he had to be very careful now. She opened the door for him, threw herself around his neck. "I missed you so much. You left without telling me. The girls told me later where you were going. How's Lily? I know how much she loved Grandpa. How's May?" "She's fine with them. You better tell me, how are you? What did you do in that time without me?" "The usual. Work, work. Nothing new. True, they've asked me several times if we're in love again or just carnal pleasures, and I pretended I didn't know what they were talking about." "That's right. What you and I have going on is nobody's business. Am I saying that right?" "That's right, honey, because it's just our feelings, and we're not gonna let anyone else get in the middle of it." Lately, May felt very bad. Her heart was aching, her father's death, quarrels with her daughter, and then there were constant hints from everyone she knew that her husband had taken up his old ways. She didn't want to believe it because she knew that if it was true, she had betrayed everyone, both father and daughter. Kate looked at her and shook her head. Listen to May. The heart is no joke, you know? Go to the hospital, then it might be too late, and you've got a daughter who's about to graduate from high school. Have you thought about her? I'm fine. Kate, you don't have to worry. It's just that my dad's death really shook me up. It's a shame that after he left and I never got to see him, I said hi to him through Lily, who was waiting for vacation and went to see her grandfather. How are you and Lily? Did you make up? Yes, of course, but she tries not to touch me. We hardly talk. Do you think that's normal? I don't know, Kate. I guess. I feel really bad for her, so every day I forgive her. She says she's not mad at me, but I can tell something's wrong. She's grown up. She can see things. You were the one who can't see past your own nose. What are you talking about? Nothing. I was just making a point. All right, let's get back to work. The stuff's here. It's got to be unpacked and put on the shelf, and you and I are just standing here talking. Joe took the early morning off. He went to work as usual and warned his wife he'd be late. He went to Jill's. He couldn't keep his eyes off her, and she was very nice to him, doing everything she could to make him feel good about himself. May came home from work, went into the kitchen, put the kettle on. She no longer looked at the clock, as before, no longer waited for anyone. She was tired. The kettle boiled, and she made herself some tea. Took a mug from sitting down at the table. She watched the sugar floating in the cup, sitting down nice and quiet. It was easy on her soul, on her heart a dull ache, and that had settled recently and never let go. She took a sip and realized she was starting to choke. Sadness clenched, and she felt really bad. She jumped out onto the porch, breathed in some fresh air, and felt a little better. Lily came out to the noise and looked at her mom and asked, "Mom, are you okay? You don't look so good." "I'm really not okay. I want to walk a little bit in the street. I think I'll feel better." "Mom, I'm with you. I'm not letting you go in this condition. You've got exams to study for. It's only a few days away." "Mom, this is a school, not an institute, so I know the school program perfectly well. Let's go. Besides, we won't be long. We'll walk a bit, and as soon as you feel better, we'll go home right away." And they went out into the street, slowly walked down the deserted street. "Mom, listen, let's go to a doctor. We can't do that, in case you have something serious. And if something happens to you, I won't survive it. Do you understand?" "Okay, daughter, I'll go to the hospital and I'll go tomorrow. For your sake, honey, I'll do anything. Mom, I love you very much and I understand what's happening to you. Only I know that we'll be fine. That's what my grandfather always told me. But if that's what my dad said, then that's how it's gonna be. Yeah." They had reached the end of the street when May noticed a couple strolling leisurely along the sidewalk. They all stopped every now and then and kissed, said something to each other, then laughed. She looked closely and realized everything, only she couldn't say anything. She didn't know what was happening to her, only heard her daughter screaming. Joe and Jill lay in bed all day. They kissed, they caressed each other, they felt good. "Why did you leave me then?" "Because you see how good we are together." "I don't know, I was just angry that you lied to me, and Tony started hitting on my wife, so I got jealous. And then when I got back, I realized that Lily was all grown up, that she didn't think of me as a man. And May's dad didn't understand me. I came home right away. May was the only one left, but I got bored with her quickly. I remember the day she told me she'd met you and I stayed up all night thinking about you. Then I decided to come home, and I still can't imagine how I'll live without you. I realize I have to do something, but I don't know how. Don't be in a hurry. We made such a mess in a hurry that I don't want to do it again. You were right, sweetheart. You were right, honey. Time will tell us how to do it. Remember I told you that a friend of mine is selling her car and needs money. She's selling it for half price. I was wondering if you could help me buy it. Can't you wait a little while? I don't have any money right now. I'm spending all my money on you, sweetheart. If she waits a little while, I'll get Lily to sell Grandpa's house, and then I'll take the car off your hands, okay? Okay, I'll talk to her. I think she'll go for it. Look, it's getting dark. Let's go for a walk. There's no one out at this time, and we've been in the house all day. Come on, my queen, your word is law. They walked quietly on the sidewalk, kissing all the time, reminding themselves of two teenagers. Behind another kiss, they didn't notice two figures watching them. It wasn't until Joe heard a scream that he realized they had been caught. May struggled to open her eyes. She couldn't realize where she was. Then I wanted to turn around, because as it seemed to her she wasn't lying comfortably. But she couldn't. She closed her eyes again. She didn't know if she was asleep or unconscious. She could only see her father standing there looking at her and saying nothing. She called out to him, shouted for him to say a word to her, but he was silent and just staring. She opened her eyes again and saw the doctor, who was standing near her, writing something down. "Great, you finally come to your senses. May, well May, the worst is over. You're alive, and the rest will follow. Tell me if you can move. For example, raise your left arm." May tried to figure out where it was and then lift it, but she couldn't. "Can you say it like that?" She tried to open her mouth, but that didn't work either. "Okay, you had a stroke, and to be honest, I thought we couldn't save you. But as you can see, it's all over. But now we're gonna get you back on your feet. It's gonna take time and money, but I'll tell your husband and daughter that." Lily couldn't find her place. She paced back and forth in the waiting room and waited for the doctor. Not far away, Joe was sitting on the couch, pretending to sleep. They hadn't spoken since the incident. Lily was disgusted. She knew before that her father was deceiving her mother, but I thought they would see it with their own eyes. When the doctor came out, Lily ran over to see how her mom was feeling. "She's passed into consciousness, but she's completely paralyzed. She can't even speak." "Can I see her?" "Come in while I talk to your father. You can stay with her." Lily went into the room and looked at her mom. She was lying there unmoving and didn't even turn her head when she heard someone come in. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Lily whispered, struggling to hold back tears. And May looked at her daughter, a tear rolling down from her eye. Lily saw that her mother recognized her. "Mom, I'll do anything to get you back on your feet, you hear me? I'll do anything for that." Lily came home, and soon Joe came home. "Your mother needs medicine and treatment, and I don't have that kind of money. Besides, she and I were going to get a divorce, so I'm not gonna watch her. You'll walk by yourself in the hospital. You can live here too. I'm not kicking you out because you're my daughter, but I forbid you to meddle in my personal life. Do you understand? As you may have noticed, I'm in love with another woman, and it's mutual. From this day forward, she will live with me. I'll forgive you to treat her with respect." Shalda also called her mom. "May met you call her mom. Shut your mouth. I told you, if you want to live in this house, you have to listen to me, or I'll throw you out like a kitten." Lily couldn't get into the institute. She had been taking care of her mother for a year, but nothing helped. She needed medicine, special gymnastics, but it all cost money. She worked part-time during the day and ran to her mother in the evening. She was allowed to stay at the hospital, so she was less likely to be at her father's house. She couldn't stand Jill, who threw out all of her mother's things, saying she didn't need them anymore. She had remodeled the whole house, and now it was vulgar and uncomfortable. Lily sat next to her mother and didn't understand how she could get her back on her feet. Time was passing, something had to be done, but she couldn't, she just didn't have the means. She herself did not notice how she fell asleep and dreamed of her grandfather. He stroked her head affectionately and told her that she had forgotten his most important words, that when his grandfather was very difficult, she should come to his house and the house would help her. She woke up all in tears. Mom was lying with her eyes closed, apparently still asleep. She got ready, kissed her mom, and before going to work, she decided to run home to change her clothes. "What do you want here?" Jill asked angrily, looking at Lily. "I need to change. I won't be here long. You were already here with your mom. You should have taken her to her grandfather's house or sold it and put her mother on her feet. But no, you're waiting for your dad to help you. But for nothing. He won't give you a penny. And even if he did, I never take it from him because I don't consider him a father. He's nobody to me. But if he did, I'm going to get it. But if that's the case, then pack your things and I'm getting out of this house, about it. With pleasure, because they're so sick of all of you." Lily walked out of the house with a bag of her things, and for some reason there wasn't much. Apparently Jill had thrown her things out too. She remembered the dream and decided not to go to work, but to drive over there to her grandfather's house and think about what she should do next. Maybe she should really take her mom home. Maybe she'll feel better, Lily thought. Lily walked up to her grandfather's house, which looked very abandoned without him. She sighed, took out her key and opened the door. Walked through the rooms, remembering how nice they had always been here. Then she walked through the rooms again. During the night, she dreamed of her grandfather again. He was standing on the rug in the great room, pointing his finger at his feet. Lily woke up and couldn't tell if it was a dream or if Grandpa had really come to see her that night. She walked to the room where he was standing, walked across the dusty carpet. The middle of the carpet, the floorboards creaked strangely somehow. It was in that exact spot. She saw a small plank there that had separated from the floor. She pulled it, it gave in, and Lily saw a recess. In it a small box. She took it out and opened it, and then she cried. "You know, granddaughter, my relative was a favorite of the queen herself." She remembered her grandfather's story, and as it turned out, it was true. Joe hadn't seen Lily for a long time and thought she would probably start the hospital. He wasn't interested in what was happening to her, how she was living. All his thoughts were occupied with Jill, who for some reason was no longer the same as she used to be. She quit her job, sat at home all day, and constantly whined that he made very little money. At first he didn't pay attention to it, and then he began to explain that he earns very well, and then began to get angry at her. "If you don't like it, go to work yourself. What else do you want from me? You've already drunk all my blood. I have no strength at all." He left the house and decided to go for a walk to cool down and not to see Jill's angry face. His feet brought him to the hospital. He had not been to his wife for so long that he felt ashamed. Lily had been by her side for a whole year, and then somehow she'd stopped coming. He hadn't seen her, and then he'd forgotten all about her. But now he decided to go in and see how May was doing, to see if she was better. Everyone used to tell him he had to help his wife, but he said he'd done all he could. It was just that her father's death was affecting her and that he was powerless. Then he said that she wanted to divorce him and they were no longer living together, but were complete strangers to each other. He found a doctor and asked how May was feeling. "Boy, you should have come back like this in a year or two. Her daughter took her away a long time ago, I don't know where. But recently she came to visit us and she had to pick up some certificates here. Tell me honestly, the girl married a rich man because she came in a cool car, but she's dressed so nicely, it's obvious that she got a rich man. What about May? She's fine now. Lily's got her back on her feet. But they've gone away from here, and where they live now, I don't know." Joe came home and went into the kitchen. He took out a glass and poured himself some vodka, drank it in one gulp, and sat down on a chair. Jill looked at him in surprise, but didn't dare to ask what was wrong. She saw that he was thinking about something and waited for him to tell her. "I was in the hospital today. I had a guilty conscience. I went to see May, and she's been gone a long time, and so has Lily. The doctor said she drove by in some fancy car. She must have married very well. Lily's a rich woman now. That's why it's like this. Some people get lucky all the time and I don't. I thought I'd start living with you again, so you'd buy me a car and a fur coat, but you just promise. I have nothing. I've been wearing the same fur coat for 2 years. I'm embarrassed in front of my friends. So go out and earn your own money if you don't like how much I earn. I spent all my money on you while I was living with May, and she didn't ask me for a penny because she was earning good money herself. We always had everything at home, even though we had a daughter. You have no one and you don't have enough. I'm so sick of you, I can't even look at you anymore. You think I love you, but I only use you all the time. I didn't need you. I just always thought you were talking about May like that, so prove that I'm 100 times better. So I got you. You're just like me. And if you appreciated what she did for you, you never would have left her. And now, even if you want to go back to her, she'll never accept you. May is kind, she'll accept me and I'll have a normal life. I'll find out where they live and prove to you that she'll accept me and we'll be together again. Understand?" Joe started making inquiries about his wife and daughter, but no one knew anything. Then he remembered about his grandfather's house and decided that when the weekend came, he would go there and find out what had happened to them, whether they had sold the house or were still living there. Sunday. Early in the morning, Joe got ready, said nothing to Jill, and drove to the village where May had once lived, where he had first met her and fallen in love with her. He walked down the familiar road and thought that, like theirs, little had changed here. Now he would come around the corner and see May's father's house. If it had been sold, he would try to find out where they might have gone. He looked at the house with all his eyes, but another thing surprised him. just as years ago he had seen May standing on the porch doing something there. So he saw her this time. She was standing there in a light-colored dress, very pretty, saying something to someone. He shifted his eyes and saw Lily in an embrace with some young man. They were laughing and chatting merrily about something. He watched from the sidelines, with envy in his heart, because he would have given anything to be standing next to them, to have Lily calling him by his daddy and May hugging him gently around the waist. He stepped out of the shadows of the trees he'd been watching. May noticed him. The smile escaped her lips, and she looked at Joe, no longer smiling. Her daughter shifted her gaze and frowned as well. "Hello, May. Hi, Lily. I thought I'd come and see how you were doing." Lily came forward with a menacing look, but May stopped her gently. "Lily, you wanted to go to the river with Henry. Lily, go, I need to talk to you." "Mom, please." I know. I'm telling you that you can trust me. I know, just don't worry." "I know, but don't worry, remember, your health is still weak and you can't worry." "I remember my happiness, go easy. Everything will be fine." When Lily and the young man had gone, May came down from the porch and went outside the wicket. "Why don't you even invite me into the house? Or have you gotten rich and gotten conceited? Don't count our money. You didn't give it to us, you better count yours. Jill's a great bookkeeper. She'll put it to good use. Have you even seen yourself in the mirror? You're wearing things I used to buy you. And Jill, that's better. She's only doing it for herself. She's doing it for you. She doesn't give a shit. And you've become cruel. I had good teachers, and you know I'm grateful to you. Because if you hadn't, I would have lived my life believing every word you said. And now I'm happy. I have a wonderful man next to me. My daughter is happy. She and her young man want to get married. I'm also enrolled in college studying. And if we lived with you, we would have none of this as you have now. I realized that if I didn't have this Jill, I'd have a friend. You never realized anything. You're still living out of habit, even though I can see you're sick of it yourself." "Yeah, May, you're right. The only thing I realized is that you were my real family, and I had to give you back because I realized I couldn't live without you. I'm gonna die." "No, Joe, you won't. I know from experience. I almost died when I saw you with her. I realized you've been lying to me the whole time. I realized that in all the years we've been together, you've only given me flowers a couple of times, and you've showered her with gifts. You never even asked me if I needed money or your help. No, why would I? You've always thought only of yourself. And I'll tell you what, and now we're happy and we'll never trade our happiness for you. So you shouldn't have come. You can go back because we don't need you anymore." After saying that, May turned and went into the house. Joe stood for a while longer and walked back to the bus stop. Already on the bus, he fully realized what had happened. He saw how happy they were, only he would never be there for them now. He bent his head and cried bitterly because he realized that only sadness awaited him.
"Archie, you've got to understand." Tears welled up in Lucy's eyes. "It's my mother. I can't put her out on the street." "You mean how she put you out on the street almost as a child and without a dime? Have you already forgotten?" Archie asked irritably. "How can you compare? She was in a clouded state of consciousness then. She didn't realize what she was doing. And now she's come to her senses. She's come to her senses all right." Archie was angry beyond belief. For over 10 years, she'd been on her own, living on her own. And then I remembered about my daughter. "By the way, how did she find you? You didn't recognize her?" "I'm sure mine wouldn't have told her anything." "It doesn't matter, Archie. Lucy wasn't going to think about such trivialities. All that matters is that she's with me now and she wants to get back together. And anyway, just because she's made a mistake doesn't mean I have to take revenge on her for the rest of my life." "That's it, Archie. It's out of the question. Mom's going to live with us. I'm not kicking her out." Archie didn't like this decision. He understood that Lucy had missed her mother all these years, and now she was just happy about her appearance and was unable to take a critical view of the situation. He himself did not believe the old woman who had appeared a few hours ago on the doorstep of their apartment for a second. But he couldn't quarrel with Lucy either. It looked like he'd have to put up with having a mother-in-law named Betty for a while. For now, he thought, we'll sort it out as we go along. Either way, I'm not going to let her hurt Lucy. Betty, then just Betty, had given birth to a daughter at the age of 25. And that was it. As she saw it, her life was over. Betty never married. First, she studied hard, not wanting to be distracted by her classmates. Then she worked just as diligently, occasionally accepting signs of attention from colleagues and casual suitors, but did not take them seriously. She was waiting for a real big love, and this love came to her in the form of a random business traveler who came to their city for a month for work. The man was older than Beatty by 7 years, was tall and slender, decently dressed and well-mannered. He wooed the girl beautifully, gave luxurious bouquets of flowers, took her to dinner in hotel restaurants for some reason, each time in different ones, walked around the night city, read poems, said compliments. In short, everything was almost like in the movies, like in a beautiful fairy tale. The farewell at the train station was quite cinematic. She cried and hugged him, he kissed her, promised to write and call, and to return to his beloved as soon as work would allow. He waved at her from the vestibule of the departing train and shouted his love, and she ran after him all the way to the end of the platform. For a while, Betty spent her time in rosy dreams, waiting to hear from her lover and composing to him affectionate and passionate letters, which for the time being were piling up in her desk drawer. He said before he left that he was going to another city on business and would not be home until a month later, so there was no point in sending her epistolary confessions any sooner. She remembered their meetings, conversations, kisses, and then she found out that she was pregnant. At first, this news only pleased the girl. It is clear that now it remains only to inform her lover about the future child, and he, as an honest man, will immediately take her to the registry office. They would get married, and then there would come such a life, imagining which Betty only squinted with pleasure, and her head began to spin sweetly. In reality, however, everything turned out to be quite different from her dreams. When Betty dialed the phone number left to her by her lover, she heard a stern voice from the receiver. Dormitory. What dormitory? She didn't understand. Dormitory number 3 of the Mech Press plant, the stern voice explained. Who do you want me to call? Betty apologized and hung up. Deciding that she had dialed the wrong number, the girl tried calling several more times, but always got the same stern, hostile janitor. He must have mixed up the numbers when he wrote it down, the young woman decided. He wrote that at the station in a hurry. He certainly could not live in a hostel. The address left by the lover was an apartment address. Betty sent a letter to her prince, paying extra at the post office for urgent delivery. But the envelope returned a week later marked addressee not found or dropped off. Utterly puzzled, Betty decided to call the information center of the city where her lover should live. They told her that the house at the address had been demolished a year ago and was now a vacant lot. Give me at least a middle name or year of birth, said the directory clerk. Or better yet, both. Betty didn't know either of those things, as there was no reason to ask about such trivialities while she was engrossed in the novel. You wouldn't ask for a passport from a man who met you every night with bouquets, carried you in his arms, read poetry, kissed you so much that your legs shook. Suddenly, she realized that she didn't even know what organization her John was visiting or what hotel he was staying in. In fact, Betty had never been in his room. They met at various restaurants and slept at her house almost daily. Betty lived in a separate apartment, so she didn't see the need to linger in faceless and uncomfortable hotel rooms. Not knowing what to think, she dialed the phone number John had left for her. When she heard the expected stern dormitory, she suddenly cried and told the stern voice everything as it was. Please, she said, see if you have such a man living with you, John. Maybe he was just too embarrassed to tell me that he was from the dormitory. You never know. I don't know what to do now. Help me. I really need to find him. Oh, girl, suddenly sighed a stern voice from the tube, and a little softened. I would love to find him too. And in the eyes of his shameless look, not a month goes by that some girl of your John is not looking for him. He's got a habit of messing with girls' heads and leaving our phone number when he leaves. I've heard all sorts of things, and crying and begging and promising money to call him. But you're the first to get pregnant, I guess. It took Betty a while to realize what had been said. When the janitor's words reached her, she just burst into tears and hung up the phone. It became clear that it was no longer worth hoping for a happy love and cloudless family life. She had to muddle through on her own. Betty went to the gynecologist for a referral for an abortion. But it turned out that the search for a lover, she missed the deadline for this procedure. After several consultations, including paid, Betty realized she would have to give birth. Not to say that this consideration pleased her. The girl was neither psychologically nor financially ready for motherhood. Betty had neither a husband nor any of the most insignificant suitors. Friends with whom she could consult, get their help and support. There was no two Betty supported with the women around her friendly relations, but no more. But most importantly, her parents. Evan and Barbara lived in a village 200 kilometers from the city. Their daughter had gotten a separate apartment so that nothing would distract her from her studies. And every time they met or called, her father would chastise Betty. Look, daughter, the apartment is your own, so use it wisely. Do not organize parties, companies do not drive, do not bring men. Study, settle in. And if you bring it in your hem, I'll whip you like a goat and I'll evict you to the street. Betty had long since finished her studies and had turned from a teenage girl into an independent young woman with a good position. But Evan persisted in repeating his command every time he spoke to his daughter. Knowing her father's strict nature, Betty couldn't even think of confessing her pregnancy to her parents. Well, she decided, we'll have the baby and hide it from her grandfathers. There's no other way out anyway. The strange thing is that Betty's plan succeeded. She managed to hide her daughter from her family for quite a long time, about 10 years. The woman made it a rule to call her parents every week or even more often, so as not to give the impression that she was hiding from them. But if Evan and Barbara wanted to visit or simply said they were going into town on business, Betty would talk herself out of it as best she could. She made up busy work schedules, invitations to friends' birthdays, theaters, dates, the need to help a friend, anything to keep her parents from coming to her house. She knew perfectly well that even if she gave her daughter to a neighbor for the time of their visit, she would not be able to hide the child's presence in the apartment. Evan sometimes lamented, "Betty, we gathered some guests for you, meat, pickles. Let's bring them over, at least to give them to the neighbors." But even against this, Betty objected very actively. It's impossible that parents communicate with neighbors and even just appear in her yard. There was bound to be some talkative grandmother who would say something about the child, and that would be the end of it. "Why do you have to go around, Daddy?" she said cheerfully. "It's a long way to my neighborhood. Let the presents lie there, and I'll come to you next week and pick them up. They won't go rotten, I guess." And she honestly came and picked them up every time after her parents' unsuccessful trip. She left Lucy's daughter for the time of these visits to the village with her neighbor Selena, at first explaining that the girl was too young for the long journey, and then not explaining anything at all. The fact that Lucy periodically remains in the family Babarikin gradually became the norm. The need to hide strongly undermined Olia from the inside. The young woman herself did not notice how she became ashamed of her daughter not only in front of her parents, but also in front of everyone around her. It constantly seemed to her that neighbors, colleagues, and just passers-by know that she raises her daughter without a husband and condemn her. They probably think she's a slut, or even worse, that she was married, but the man did not keep. She turned out to be a bad hostess, a worthless wife. Walking with Lucy, she constantly shrank into a lump inside herself, fearing unpleasant looks. At work, she almost never mentioned her daughter, fearing the judgment of her colleagues. In the kindergarten, she avoided conversations with teachers and other parents, and every time she waited for them to point fingers at her, to shame her, to laugh at her. In public, Betty carefully kept her face, making herself look independent and proud. But at home, she would lash out at Lucy, scolding her daughter for the slightest offense or for a carelessly spoken word. She could pounce on the girl with mats because of the fact that she long buttoned a sandal or dripped juice on the polished table, or just inappropriately approached with a request to read a book or watch a drawing. Soon the matter ceased to be limited to scolding. Betty hit her daughter with anything, and just a palm, and a belt from a jacket, and a carpet beater, and a boot, and a wet towel, and a cord from an extension cord, anything that came to hand. At times of such outbursts, the woman had no control over herself, and when the irritation subsided, she was ashamed of them and felt guilty in front of her daughter. Moreover, Lucy, having sobbed after a scandal somewhere in the corner of the apartment, always first came to make peace with her mother. She would approach her mother, hugging Betty, burying her nose in her, and quietly asking, "Mom, you're not angry anymore." "I'm not angry, my daughter," Betty replied shamefacedly. "I'm sorry I snapped." "I forgive you," Lucy said, stroking her mother's head or hand. "I love you." Those words made Betty want to cry even more. The guilt, the feeling of being wrong, the shame of being ashamed of herself, the need to hide from her parents all the time, none of it was good for her psyche. She became nervous and hysterical, and on her face, despite the carefully built mask of impregnability, began to show an expression of fear and battered. The day when Betty went to enroll her daughter in school turned everything upside down. In the school reception area sat a genteel-looking secretary, an elderly woman with a strict hairdo, in an impeccably ironed dress with a white lace collar. Betty handed her the documents and a pre-filled questionnaire, and she quickly ran her eyes over them. "Why is the information about the parents not completely filled out?" she asked. "I see the mother's name, but where is the father's?" "No father," Betty said. "I'm on my own." "I see." The secretary looked at Lucy's birth certificate and then scrutinized Betty from under her glasses from head to toe. "I'll put a note on your form, single mother." This status was far from new to Betty. It had followed her from the registry office, where she had drawn up the documents for Lucia, through all the kindergartens, milk kitchens, and polyclinics. He allowed her to receive some benefits, but he also seemed deeply offensive to the woman. She had put up with it for a while, but today, for some reason, whether it was the gracefulness of the secretary or the look she gave her, Betty realized she couldn't take it anymore. "Bid whatever you want," she almost shouted and stormed out of the reception area. She ran to work, not remembering herself, and there she collapsed on the sofa in the employee lounge and burst into tears, unable to hold back any longer. She rolled around on the couch, pounded her hands on the backrest and cushions, howled, scratched the upholstery, choked on her tears. A colleague, one of the employees of their audit department, a dry and usually taciturn woman, came to her rescue. Having found Betty and assessed her condition, the colleague first locked the door of the room from the inside, then grabbed the woman on the couch, hugged her tightly and held her there, stroking her head until Oli's hysterics were over. Then she told the woman to wash her face, poured a glass of water with some kind of sedative in it, sat her down on the couch, and sat down beside her. "Betty," she said affectionately, "I can see that something is happening to you. I won't ask you for details. If you want them, you can tell me when you're ready. But I can see that you need psychological help, and I know a place that can help you. You're sending me to a mental institution." Betty snorted. She was embarrassed in front of her colleague for witnessing her hysterics, and she didn't know how to behave. "Why go to the asylum?" she objected. "I want to help you, not destroy you." "No, not at all. There is a place where you will be accepted by anyone with any of your problems and help you solve them. If you want, we can visit it after work today." "Let's visit," Betty agreed, shrugging her shoulders. After everything that had happened, she felt uncomfortable refusing. That's how she got to the meeting of the Brothers and Sisters organization. And from that day, as she thought of it, her life began anew. In the spacious bread hall sat people, many people, all kinds of people. Men and women, young and old, and even frankly old, in expensive suits and in greasy jeans, beautiful, well-groomed, and frankly ugly, different. At the end of the hall, on a small dais stood a large man. He had a completely secular appearance, but everyone gathered called him Father Jack. The man spoke, addressing the audience. "There is sin in all of us, and that is normal. There are no sinless people. That is the condition of our life. We are born with a pure heart and an open soul. The spark of God burns in each of us from birth. But during our life, under the influence of external circumstances, our soul begins to be filled with garbage, first small, then large. It prevents our spark from burning in full force. All its heat goes to burn the dirt that has come into our souls, but it is not always enough. Our open soul is used by dirty, evil, unworthy people. They draw us into deception, entice us to commit sin, and we succumb to them because we have no experience in resisting temptation. We commit sin and carry it with us through life, and we are tormented by it. We blame ourselves for having sinned. We begin to see ourselves as low, unworthy, unclean, and we forget that there is a part of sin in everyone. Yes, in everyone. When someone reproaches you for wrong behavior, says that you live unworthily, know that he is not talking about you, but about himself. With these attacks, he is just trying to dull the pain that his own sin, once committed, brings him every minute. Be stronger and wiser than such people. Forgive them. Try to bring them to the light. Everyone can come to the light, no matter how unclean he may seem to himself. You only need to accept your sin and atone for it in word and deed. Through this, you will be cleansed from the garbage inside you, and you will allow the spark of God inside you to burn again in full force. You will once again be at peace with yourself and the world. Recognize, accept, and redeem in word and deed. It is a big job, but the brothers and sisters will help you do it. Here in the hall are people who have already gone through the cleansing procedure and have changed their lives for the better. You know about them. Many of them have already become your helpers on the way of deliverance from sin. Betty listened, and every word resonated with her. It seemed to her that Father Jack was talking about her. Had she not been an open-hearted girl with a pure soul when she met John? Had he not led her into sin by deceit and temptation? Was it not due to the circumstances of life, the birth of a daughter, her father's ironclad principles, the need to lie, that her soul was filled with dirt and filth? Life happened as it happened, and Betty thought she would have to drag her dirt with her to the end. But it turns out it can be cleaned up, and there are people willing to help her. Could it really be? After the general meeting, Father Jack, who had been warned in advance about the new girl, invited Betty into his office. He spoke to her so tenderly, so sensitive and attentive, that Betty suddenly told him her whole story. She told him and froze, for she was about to be rebuked. But Father Jack said, "Poor girl, how much you've suffered." "Well, nothing. If you want, we will help you to cope with your suffering. You are already stronger than many who come here. You realize that you have sinned and you are ready to get rid of it. You have already done a lot of work within yourself, and you are a head taller than most newcomers to our society. Often people are afraid to admit their sinfulness to themselves, but you're not. You're doing a great job. I believe that the Herculean work you've done should not go to waste. I and the brothers and sisters can help you to continue to get rid of your sin, to atone for it in word and deed. Of course, if you want to." Of course, Betty wanted to. She was terribly afraid to tell about her life, and she was happy to receive not rejection but understanding and acceptance after telling. True, if she had told her parents the same thing, they would have received her no less affectionately than Father Jack. But Betty was never meant to know that. The Society of Brothers and Sisters was a banal, parochial sect. It was headed by Father Jack, alias Jack. About 10 years ago, he had graduated from the psychology department of the local medical university, but he had quickly become disillusioned with the work of a psychologist. The local psychoneurological dispensary scared him away by the small salary. Private clinics did not like the need to flatter clients and listen to the same complaints of fed-up housewives who had never had any psychological problems. Jack racked his brains and decided that he could find a more interesting and profitable use for his knowledge. At that time, with the advent of perestroika, the country began a boom on everything near mystical. Various sects and religious communities appeared. Folk healers appeared on TV. Politicians and businessmen did not hide the fact that they consulted in their affairs with psychics and astrologers. After some thought, Jack decided that the religious community format suited him best. He was tempted, of course, to become a personal fortune teller for some respectable businessmen. But there you'd be seen as a servant, and if you made a mistake, you'd be instantly wasted, Jack reasoned. And he wanted respect, adoration, admiration, obedience, and of course, a steady income. And a small flock could provide all that. A few years later, Walker was convinced that his idea was paying off. The Brothers and Sisters Society had several hundred members, and new ones were steadily coming in. Jack speculated on a sense of sinfulness. He insinuated to each newcomer that he had a serious sin that prevented him from living. It turned out to be quite simple. Every person knows for himself some unrighteous act or remembers an event that became a turning point in his life. With skillful presentation of information, this act or event acquired the status of sin and the main obstacle in all endeavors. It was easiest to work with women, almost all of whom had either had an abortion or had been unfaithful to their man, or had seriously thought about it. With men was more difficult, but Jack, thanks to a deep knowledge of psychology and good practice, and found something to hook them. It also helped that people who turned to the Brothers and Sisters were initially broken, not too sure of themselves. It was quite easy to convince them both of their own sinfulness and of the fact that in the society they would be helped to cleanse themselves of their filth. Atonement by word of mouth was practically a ritualized act, thought out in detail by Jack, and atonement for sin by deed involved the sinner donating part of his property to the community, that is, in favor of Jack Walker. For each stage, the parishioners were seriously prepared and processed so that parting with property was practically voluntary and without doubts. After that, the person was considered cleansed of sin and could start a new life without the support of society. If he was not ready to part with the brothers and sisters, he was offered to attend meetings and socialize with other novices as usual, on condition that he would donate 1/10 of his income to the society every month. Many agreed to this. At first, Jack was surprised at how many people accepted his terms without complaint, but then he realized that he was careful to impress upon the congregation that brothers and sisters was a place where they would be welcome, good, bad, or downright evil, and help to cope with any problem. It gave people a sense of all-round support, and that is what parishioners agreed to pay for. There were some people, however, from whom there was nothing to take. For such people, Jack devised special tasks as redemption by deed. For example, if he saw in a man a gift to dispose people to himself, he assigned him as a penance to attract 10 newcomers to the brothers and sisters within a month. He assigned women to cater for mass meetings, making tea and coffee for the congregation, baking scones and cookies. The men were usually told to clean up after big events or to work for the community in some other way. His goals were not always self-serving. For example, several parishioners helped a poor grandmother from the community to repair her apartment as a redemption work. Another group spent the whole summer tending to the dacha of one of the community members who suddenly fell seriously ill, and at the same time took care of the community member herself. This fit in well with the concept of brothers and sisters will help you with any problem. There were also very special tasks as atonement by deed. For example, with the help of his sinners, Jack Walker bought a nice building for the brothers and sisters on the cheap. Initially, there was a cafe canteen, quite good and popular. The owner was not going to sell it, on the contrary, he was actively promoting his business. But Mishka got the reins under his tail. And for 3 months, several brothers and sisters actively spoiled the reputation of the institution. They planted rats and cockroaches in the kitchen and warehouses of the cafe. They made complaints to every possible authority, from SES to the fire department, and the cafe was plagued with inspections. They vomited in the dining room after eating a couple of spoonfuls of soup or side dishes. They made a mess in the sanitary facilities for visitors, stealthily tricked waiters, stole jackets from the racks. In addition to this was organized several defamatory articles about the cafe in the local press. And specially trained parishioners lingered in the surrounding yards and in long lines and spread their nasty rumors about the institution. The flow of visitors to the cafe dried up, and the owner was forced to close the business. Father Jack bought the building from him for mere cents, and the brothers and sisters involved in the operation received the long-awaited redemption of sins. Jack Walker did this sort of thing often enough. He had gotten good at brainwashing people, and his parishioners no longer asked questions about why it was necessary to commit a new sin to atone for one sin. They did whatever Father Jack told them to do, and if anyone tried to refuse, Jack knew how to persuade them. Among his flock was an employee of a detective agency and a young girl who was the mistress of one of the local FBI officers. With their help, he gathered information on his entire flock, their family and friends. This allowed him to control the financial situation of people, to understand who and how much he could get from, and who was better to use as labor force. And it also helped to keep the flock in line with the help of light blackmail. Father Jack arranged a 3-room apartment in the quiet center of the city, bought a nice country house, got a couple of cars for trips out of town and for traveling around the city. On his accounts accumulated quite a substantial amount of money that allowed him to live comfortably for 12 years. But Jack Walker tasted something that was much tastier than wealth, unlimited power over people. So he was not going to stop the activities of this sect, and even on the contrary, he was thinking of taking it from the city to the regional level, and then to the level. But about all this Betty, of course, did not even guess. Regular communication with the brothers and sisters improved Betty's state of mind. After a few months, she became noticeably calmer and more confident, The woman stopped being afraid of slanted glances, forgot about the need to be shy of others, became more sociable and peaceful. After another year, she finally got rid of the guilt that constantly ate her. Betty reasoned that everyone had some sin, that is, her case was not an exception, but just a kind of norm. What was there to be ashamed of? What was there to be guilty about? The inner changes were also reflected in the woman's appearance. Her posture changed, her movements became smoother and calmer, her gait became easy. She began to take care of herself with pleasure, did new hairstyles, bought beautiful clothes, tried different makeup techniques. Experiments with appearance helped her to get acquainted with herself, new, calm, cleansed of sins. But in addition, they pursued another goal: to attract the attention of Father Jack. Betty had fallen head over heels in love with the rector and secretly dreamed of someday winning his affection. For Jack Walker, her feelings were neither a secret nor a surprise. He was accustomed to having female parishioners fall in love with him from time to time, but he never allowed himself to approach one of them lest he bring discord into his flock. In this aspect, he preferred not to use his official position. Jack was careful with women in love, keeping the fires of passion alive, but not letting them grow into flames of passion that swept away everything in their path. Of course, he could just carefully nullify those feelings, but that, from his point of view, was not rational. It was easier to manipulate women in love than women who were fascinated by his teachings, but indifferent to him personally. In any case, falling in love had done Betty good. She had a purpose in life again, a reason to get up in the morning and enjoy the world around her. It's just a pity that all the positive changes in the woman did not affect her relationship to her own daughter. In Ola's head, clearly rooted in the idea that Lucy is her sin, inescapable, indelible, unredeemable. There was nothing left for her but to learn to live with it, and she had learned to the best of her ability. Betty stopped snapping at her daughter, scandalizing her, beating her for the slightest offense. Instead, it was indifference. The woman practically did not notice Lucy, did not talk to her, was not interested in her studies and hobbies. She made remarks to her daughter when she, in her opinion, behaved wrongly, but never praised her for good behavior and good deeds, taking it for granted. Affection was out of the question. When Lucy tried to hug or kiss her mother, to take her hand, Betty looked at her coldly and shied away from her daughter. She provided Lucy with everything she needed: food, clothes, school supplies, but never spoiled her with pretty outfits, sweets, or new toys. All the money that could be spent on things and entertainment for her daughter, the woman preferred to donate to brothers and sisters. Sometimes Betty tried to tell her daughter the basics of Father Jack's teachings, but Lucy refused to accept them, and the woman backed off, deciding that the child was too young for such serious talk. So it went on for about 4 years. Betty had planned to raise her daughter to the age of 18, and then either move her out of the house or join the brothers and sisters, and thus get rid of her sin. But all her plans came to a crashing halt one quiet Friday evening. Betty had finished cleaning up the kitchen after dinner when Lucy once again flew up to her with the words, "Mommy, look what I made on my mug. It's for you." Her daughter constantly tried to attract her attention with drawings, or a diary full of A's, or some crafts. Betty wasn't interested in any of it. The doorbell rang, and she pulled the girl away from her and went into the hallway. When she opened the door, the woman was frozen and speechless. On the threshold stood her mother, Barbara Betty. At her feet stood 2 large, round-sided travel bags that looked like well-fed, large-breed dogs. Betty had talked to her mother on the phone a couple days ago, but a visit had been out of the question then. The woman was confused, but Barbara smiled welcomingly, as if she hadn't noticed her daughter's embarrassment. "Hello, Betty," she said. "Sorry I didn't call, but I thought you should be home before the weekend. It all happened so fast, I didn't have time to warn you." She picked up her bags and stepped into the hallway, pushing Betty aside. She looked around. "It's a nice hallway you've got here, spacious and bright. At least I'll see how you live, what repairs you've made." Lucy's face peeked out of the door of the room. "Mommy, where are you? Who's there? Oh, hello." The girl stared curiously at the guest. The old woman looked at her curiously. "Mama, you say?" she asked. "Well, yes, this is Betty, my mom. Don't you know?" "Well, now I do," smiled Betty Sr. "Let's get acquainted. I'm Barbara, your grandmother. What's your name?" "Evan died last year." Barbara buried her husband, grieved, and realized that it was hard and boring to live alone in their house. She decided to move to the city where she'd be more comfortable and closer to her daughter. She sold the car left by her husband and the land shares they had received when the collective farm was disbanded. She looked for a buyer for the house, but agreed with him that the deal would wait until she looked for an apartment in the city. The price of the house was agreed in dollars, so that from a possible delay, Barbara did not lose anything. But the buyer, on the contrary, was interested in avoiding exchange rate fluctuations and therefore actively participated in the search for a new apartment. It was he who eventually found her a nice one-room apartment with a large kitchen and a wide balcony, albeit in the cheapest part of town. Barbara called the sellers and came to the viewing, immediately taking with her the money for the deposit. They were going to look at the apartment on Saturday, and if everything worked out, they were going to make the deal in a week. Barbara planned to stay with her daughter during that time. Getting acquainted with her granddaughter was painless. The girl was terribly happy that now she had a real grandmother and filled the old woman with questions and stories. Lucy went to bed at midnight, full of impressions. Then Barbara and Betty sat down in the kitchen to talk. Contrary to expectations, her mother didn't scold her for giving birth without her husband or for hiding the baby for so long. She only complained that Evan had never seen her granddaughter, but otherwise she felt sorry for her daughter, who had suffered alone with the child and her spy games. But Betty did not need this sympathy and empathy. She more than received them in brothers and sisters. After stating the facts and listening to her mother for a while, she curtailed the conversation and sent Barbara to bed. Everything worked out with the apartment. While waiting for the deal and the old owners to move in, Beatrice stayed with her daughter and granddaughter. For 2 weeks, she had time to look at the relations in their family and make some conclusions for herself. When the apartment was ready for occupancy, she suggested to Betty, I think Lucy would be better off with me. Give her to me. I've lived without a granddaughter for so many years, they'll make up for it." "Oh, Lucy, will you come and live with me?" "What about Mommy?" the girl asked. "And to Mom we will go to visit when she wants." "Agreed?" "Agreed," exclaimed Lucy, who for the past few days received more attention from her grandmother than from her mother for all the previous years. "Very well," said Betty in an indifferent tone. "I will pack Lucy's things." In her heart, she was glad to be rid of her sins sooner than expected. All her childhood, Betty had been convinced that adults were extremely unreliable people. It is impossible to guess when they will praise you and when they will scold you. There is no pattern to their mood swings. Exemplary behavior is no guarantee that you will be petted and called a good girl. Interesting things do not occupy them. Beautiful gifts are boring to them, and in general, to spend time with children they do not seek. Such conclusions the girl made, observing her own mother, and extended them to the entire adult population of the planet. The only exception she considered was Aunt Selena, where her mother occasionally left her when she was busy. Aunt Selena was always in an even mood, never once raised her voice at Lucia or her son Archie, and it was impossible to imagine that she could hit children with her boots. She always listened attentively to Sashka's stories about school, checked his lessons, praised him for his A's. And with Lucy, she treated affectionately, read her books, taught her some small needlework. The girl seriously believed that Aunt Selena was the most reasonable woman of all her adult acquaintances, and was sincerely perplexed when Archie, under the influence of adolescence, was angry with her mother or told her that she did not understand anything. Aloud, she did not argue with Archie. The boy was about 5 years older than she was, and he seemed incredibly mature and serious. He was also very handsome. Over the years of neighboring, he got used to the girl and treated her like a little sister, interested in her affairs, protected her on walks from big dogs and angry boys, invented some games for her, taught her to ride a bicycle, sometimes joked with her without malice. He seemed like a fairy prince to Lucy. Deep down, she was in love with him and hoped that when she grew up, Archie would marry her. Moving in with her grandmother brought Lucy many discoveries. First of all, she finally saw grown-up people she could rely on. The first of these was Barbara herself. She didn't fight or scandalize. She clearly defined for her granddaughter what she could and could not do. She took care of the girl, spoiled her, remembered her promises to Lucy, and strictly fulfilled them. Then it turned out that grandmother's neighbors and friends behaved the same way. Gradually, Lucy looked at adult teachers, leaders of circles, sales clerks, parents of classmates, and found that they, in principle, they are not so bad. Each of them has its own patterns of behavior, and with each can get along if these patterns know and take into account. The world was no longer scary and unfamiliar. It was slowly turning into a friendly friend that could be relied on. Barbara transferred Lucy to another school closer to home. There no one knew the girl as frightened and uptight, insecure and nervous. Her modesty was written off as the usual shyness of a newcomer, and they helped her overcome it. Soon Irishka had friends and even formed a friendly relationship with some teachers. Previously, the girl could not even think of such a thing, and for a long time it was strange to her that with an adult, with a teacher, you can talk freely, express your thoughts, disagree, and even argue. And this dispute would not end in punishment or scandal, but would be conducted within the framework of a normal dialogue. All these discoveries delighted and encouraged Lucia. She told Barbara Stepanovna about them with delight and shared them with Aunt Selina and Archie over the telephone. The only regret was that they couldn't be shared with her mother. Betty was completely removed from her daughter's life. She spent almost all her free time at the Brothers and Sisters, rushing there in the evenings after work, disappearing there all weekend. She used all her spare money for the needs of the community and was extremely proud of it. She would have donated her apartment to the Brothers and Sisters, but the guardianship authorities stopped her. Lucy was registered in the apartment, and until she came of age, the girl could not be discharged, and therefore it was impossible to dispose of the apartment freely. Betty had tried to get her mother to sign her granddaughter in a couple of times, but Barbara realized what it could turn out to be and refused flatly. Over the years, living with her grandmother, Lucy had seen her mother 4 times, and about 10 times she had talked to her on the phone. Barbara explained her granddaughter's behavior as best she could. She told her about the cult, told her that her mother had fallen under the influence of too many strangers and did not belong to herself. She assured her that Lucy was not to blame for anything, that there were problems that only adults could deal with. Children could not handle them. The girl would not succeed in keeping her mother away from the community of her father Jack, no matter what she did, no matter how she behaved. The only thing Lucy could do now was hope that her mother would come to her senses and continue to love her, or at least respect her for giving her life, raising her, feeding and clothing her for so long, Barbara said. Lucy tried to believe her. She missed her mother all through her childhood, until she was 17. After high school, Betty went to technical school to become an accountant. She and her grandmother had decided that it was necessary to first acquire a profession, with the help of which you can feed yourself, and then proceed to higher education. Lucy understood perfectly well why her grandmother insisted on it. The two of them were living on Barbara's small pension, and it had become noticeably insufficient. The girl worked part-time when she had the opportunity, but her earnings were so small that they could not save the situation. She and her grandmother would still have a couple of years of technical school, but 5 years at the university would be gone. Barbara died in early September. Lucy came home after technical school and found her grandmother sitting at the sewing machine. The girl from the threshold began to tell the old woman something, at the same time changing clothes, turning on the kettle in the kitchen, walking around the apartment. Only after a few minutes she noticed that her grandmother, for some reason, she did not answer. The doctors later said it was a blood clot. It happens. Death came instantly. Barbara did not suffer, and it calmed Lucia a little. She called Betty to tell her the news, but as usual, she didn't find her at home. She didn't have her mother's work phone. She had to call them and asked Aunt Selina to give her mother the information. The neighbor called back in the late afternoon. "Lucy, I told Betty everything you asked," she said. She nodded, said thank you, and went to her room. "There's nothing more I can tell you." Mother didn't call back that day or the next. There was money for the funeral. Her grandmother had warned Lucia more than once that it was in a box in the sideboard. The dress, slippers, towels, handkerchiefs, and everything else needed for the burial were kept there as well. Plus, each of Barbara's kind-hearted neighbors and friends who came to the funeral slipped Lucy 100, a 500, and 1,000. Aunt Selina came too. She said that Archie had some business to attend to and couldn't get away, but she sent her sincere condolences to Lucy. She slipped a little envelope into her pocket too. Betty never showed up. Returning from the funeral and wake to the devastated apartment, Lucy counted the cash. It turned out that all the expenses for the ritual had been completely repaid. Even more, on the amount of money given out by hardy neighbors, it was possible to live for 4 months, and if you squeeze, then with half a year. Damn funerals, it turns out. Not a bad way to collect money from the population, sarcastically thought the girl, and burst into tears sitting on the floor near her grandmother's couch. It was possible to live, but how to live, she did not understand. Lucy could not get through to Betty, but she talked to Aunt Selena every evening. 2 or 3 times a week the girl was visited by her grandmother's friends, all of them in turn. They brought her some pies and other homemade food, checked the condition of the apartment, had long warm conversations with Arishka about everything in the world. Little by little the girl's grief dulled. She began to look at the world again with the same confidence. She did not miss a single class at the technical school and was on a good account there. Lucy found a small part-time job as a cleaner, but she had to start somewhere. She looked after the apartment, kept it clean and tidy, so as not to fall foul of her grandmother's friends. She even accepted a couple of date invitations from boys from the parallel course. So little by little 6 months passed, and then Lucy's quiet life collapsed completely. One evening there was a demanding ring at the door. Lucy opened the door and gasped as Betty stood on the doorstep. "Mommy." "Hi," the girl said incredulously. "Come in." "Hi," said Betty grudgingly. "I need the deeds to the apartment." "Do you know where they are?" "The papers?" "For the apartment?" Lucy had expected anything but that. "The papers for my grandmother's apartment," Betty repeated a little slower, very clearly, as if she were talking to a lunatic. "I need to register the inheritance. For that I need the certificate of ownership, the contract under which the apartment was bought." "Inheritance?" Lucy still didn't understand. "Inheritance, inheritance," repeated Betty, already irritated. "My mother died. I am her direct heir, so I need to register the apartment on myself." "Why are you standing there like a pole? Let me live for myself. The papers are probably in the closet or in the secretary." She pushed the girl away, resolutely went into the apartment and began to look through the contents of the secretary, commenting on it aloud. "So, utility bills, that'll come in handy. Employment history, no need for that. Warranty cards? My God, what a lot of junk. Ah, here." Betty pulled out a thin transparent folder and took a quick look at its contents. Everything seemed to be in place. "Oh, and I need my mom's death certificate." "Where is it? What's it for?" Lucy was still confused, but to the confusion was already mixed with wariness. "And what are you going to do with the apartment after you're done with it?" "That's none of your business," said Betty sharply. "By the way, baby, I suggest you pack up and vacate the apartment." "Clear out? What do you mean, vacate? Where am I going?" Lucy was indignant. "It's not my problem. I've put up with you for too long already. You are my sin, you are my punishment, and I have dragged you as long as I could. I'll be glad to be rid of you once and for all. This apartment will be mine, and I don't need you here at all. You'll be 18 in a couple of months, and I'll be lucky enough to be completely free of any responsibility to you. So why don't we just say goodbye now? A couple of months won't matter, will it?" So Lucy found herself on the street. Her first thought was to go to Aunt Selena's, but she dismissed the idea immediately. It was impossible to imagine that she would live next door to her mother after everything that had happened. The girl went to her fellow students in the dormitory. Those, having heard her story, hid her from the commandant, stealing her student ID card from the watch. In the morning they went to the curator, and then to the educational part. Lucy got a place in the dorm. A couple of weeks, however, had to hide at the girls', but then the bureaucratic machine finished its work, and the girl moved into the dormitory with full rights. Lucy studied, worked part-time, saved money for a rented apartment. Periodically, she called Aunt Selena and her grandmother's buddies, just to let them know she was okay. The conversations were short. The situation in the dormitory watch, where the phone was located, did not dispose to long conversations. After getting her diploma, Betty found a job, rented a small apartment not far from the office, and began to learn to live an adult life. A few months passed when she met Archie by chance on the street. Archie had dreamed of big money since he was a kid, but not because he wanted a super fancy car or a cottage with its own pool. No, he would not have refused those benefits that accompany wealth, but his main goal was quite different. Selena had raised him alone, and the boy had been accustomed from childhood to notice how hard his mother worked, how much she denied herself in order to provide her son not only with the necessities of life, but also with important boyish pleasures. When Archie was 12 years old, he solemnly promised his mother that when he grew up, she would not need anything, and he diligently fulfilled this promise as best he could. Archie started working part-time at 14, and in his 20s, after studying at the university and getting some acquaintances, he opened his own company for reselling and customizing computers. The business was slowly gaining momentum and began to bring profit, even if not a big one yet, but Archie felt that he was on the right track. What ruined the boy was his lack of experience. Honest business in the late 90s was, in principle, already possible, but it required a lot of money. And to run a dishonest business, it was necessary to have certain knowledge and acquaintances, which the young entrepreneur did not have yet. Archie was caught forging documents in tax evasion. The firm was liquidated. He managed to save some money and some equipment, which gave him the opportunity to start the business again, albeit with a smaller scale. But the problem was that Archie was a wanted man. He couldn't show up at home or at any of his friends' houses. He couldn't cooperate with former partners or serve familiar customers. Worse, he couldn't register a business or a car or a rental agreement. He couldn't even register anywhere because if he showed up anywhere, he would be instantly caught by the valiant police and put on trial. That wasn't part of the plan. For a week, he had been circling the city, sleeping in some random hotels where they didn't ask for documents, or in the apartments of random guys he met in bars and at concerts, and agonizing over what to do now. And then he met Lucy. He hadn't seen the girl for almost 10 years, since she had moved away from her mother, and now he was sincerely glad to meet her. Lucy invited him to her house, listened to the story of his childhood pal's misadventures, and suggested, "Stay at my place for the present. No one will look for you here. I'm not on the list of your contacts of the last few years, and it's unlikely that anyone will dig up childhood acquaintances." Archie recognized that this was a logical argument and stayed, and as it turned out, he stayed forever. After a while, he and Lucy began to live as husband and wife. Archie even proposed to the girl, but immediately stipulated that he could not register the marriage right now. "In 10 years, when the statute of limitations expires and I will stop looking for me, then yes, maybe. If you agree to wait for me that long," he said. "I'll wait, I can't help it." Lucy smiled. "I've been waiting since I was a little girl. I'll be patient for 10 years. After some more time, Lucy opened the sole proprietorship and began to sell and customize computers with Archie. Her husband prompted her reliable suppliers, advised her how to communicate with each of the potential customers to lure them to the service, explained the subtleties of customs clearance of office equipment, himself selected from yesterday's students, programmers, and system administrators, who were then sent to customers to configure computers and automate their business. He himself drew up TOR on the basis of clients' explanations, wrote additions to 1C, designed databases and special software for the needs of customers. The only thing Lucy did not allow him to do was bookkeeping. That's where she stood her ground. "You've already messed it up once," she said. "Now leave the conduct of finances to a certified specialist." The two of them coped well with this life. Their firm soon grew and acquired several branches in the city and then in the region. The guys bought a spacious apartment, bought a country house and a car for Aunt Golly, and bought a nice car for themselves. Naturally, everything was written down on Lucia, down to the last spoon. Archie could not even get a bank card. Aunt Selena still periodically called the search and wondered if there was any news about his son. So Lucy Beatty had suddenly, by the time she was 30, grown a property and become a cool business lady. She did not diminish her merits in all this, but she was well aware that without Archie all this would not have happened, and repeatedly emphasized it. So Archie could not worry. The woman was not going to take advantage of her position and throw him out in the cold, leaving him without a dime or a place to live. He did not worry until Betty, his mother-in-law, appeared on his doorstep. Betty had spent most of her life with the brothers and sisters, the last few years literally. She donated both of her apartments to the congregation and moved into a shared house where she has lived for the past few years with other parishioners. She was completely satisfied with this life. The new members of the congregation were responsible for all the household matters in the house, thus atoning for their sins with work. All the women's time was divided between work and serving their religion and fellowship with their brothers in faith. In addition, being in the common house allowed her to see Father Jack more often. Betty was calm and completely happy. But one day, Father Jack called her to his house and suddenly spoke to the woman about her daughter. Betty had no idea what had become of her. She thought she was completely rid of this sin of hers, and now had every right to live in tranquility and peace with herself and others. But that's not what Father Jack said. Her sin still exists, lives and thrives, and is about to multiply. And if she wanted to live the rest of her life in peace and tranquility, it was time to finally atone for that sin by doing something about it. You can't just turn a blind eye to a sin, Father Jack said, and think it doesn't exist anymore. If you stop paying attention to it, it will not disappear, it will not melt into thin air. On the contrary, it will be filled with power, and it will spread out into the world and fill it with itself. This is how your daughter acquires property, develops business, fills the city and region with herself and her business. The only way to stop it is to recognize that it exists and make it cease to exist. Betty listened and out of habit believed. Really, it was so simple. The solution had been lying on the surface for so many years, and she had not seen it. It seemed to her that the little girl would not survive without her mother's attention. She thought that a young girl with no friends and no money was bound to get into some kind of trouble, end up on the street, and disappear without a trace. She carefully turned a blind eye to her sin, but it was in her power to remove it completely, to remove it herself, by her own efforts. You can't do it on your own, Father Jack said. We have other people to do it. You need to believe that your sin exists, find out the details of its existence, and tell me so that I can prepare the ground for them. Father Jack, Jack Walker, never failed to keep tabs on the near and dear ones of his parishioners. Some he monitored closely and constantly. Others he requested information about once a year, or even in a few years. He first learned about Irina Siliverstova and her business about 5 years ago. All these years he had been watching the girl and the development of her company. Jack also kept an eye on her common-law husband, and finally, he decided that it was time to act. Logically, the young couple had reached the maximum in this city, and now should either change the sphere of activity, which could be fraught with losses, or move to a new, larger city, where it would be more difficult to get to them. It is a pity if such real estate, car, and most importantly, business, bringing a stable and solid income, will pass by, if there is an opportunity to seize them. All you have to do is get Betty in the right frame of mind. Explain to her that it is necessary to make peace with her daughter, to observe her for some time, and to find out how it is more convenient to kill her. Obviously, there's no way she's going to be allowed to do it herself. It must be made to look like an accident, and Betty, having no experience in such matters, would not be able to do it cleanly. If there is even the slightest suspicion that Lucy's death is criminal, one cannot guess for a long time whom the police will begin to suspect in the first place. Of course, the mother, the only legal heiress of the deceased, who disappeared unknown where more than 10 years, and then suddenly appeared out of nowhere just before the tragedy. No, it's better not to take any chances, better to splurge on professionals. But the collection of information Beatty can be trusted, at least on this, to save money. The play, The Return of the Penitent Mother, went well. With tears in her eyes, Betty told how badly she was treated in the sect, how she was hypnotized and zombified, and how by an incredible effort of will she managed to get rid of this hypnosis. She blamed her daughter for mistreating her in her childhood and youth, for not being interested in her life, for kicking her out of the house. She apologized and begged her to accept her and try to start over. Lucy, of course, had collapsed and cried, and then, wiping away her tears, had gone to prepare a guest room for her mother. True, Betty had heard that her daughter's roommate was unhappy with this decision and even tried to change Lucy's mind. But where could he cope with the childish longing for her mother, which the abandoned girl had carried within her for so many years? Betty had no doubt that if Lucy believed her, no amount of the most fervent objections, no amount of the most reasonable and logical arguments would change her mind. And so it was. It took Betty several weeks to learn the habits and routines of the young family. Of course, she had to play up her sincere interest in the life of her daughter and her common-law husband, but the older woman could handle it. After all, her interest could really be called sincere to some extent, for Father Jack had told her to study her sin in as much detail as possible, not to turn away from it. And so Betty did. Lucy and Archie's family life was not exactly standard. Archie was almost always at home on his computer. He was either writing software on clients' orders or talking on the phone with the firm's branches in other cities, solving their problems, controlling their work, studying their reports. Lucy, on the other hand, left home early in the morning and returned in the evening. She managed all the company's business in their city and also worked with key clients. All day long, the young woman disappeared in her office or traveled to other people's offices. She traveled mostly by car and practically never walked. Grocery shopping and cooking, as well as most of the other household chores in the family, were handled by Archie. He could carve out time during the workday to run to the store and cook something unpretentious. Lucy cooked on Sundays. On Saturday, the young people traditionally went to Mama Selena's house in the country. Lucy mentioned to her mother that this was the name of her former neighbor in their house, but that Archie was Selena's son. She had no time to tell her. The young man, obeying more intuition than logic, quickly turned the conversation to another topic, and later asked Lucia, "Don't tell Betty yet that I am your foreign neighbor." "Why?" The girl wondered. "Do you think she'll turn you into the police?" "No, of course not." Archie smiled peacefully. "But she might tell about me somewhere, casually, for example, to some common old friend, without malice, just without thinking. But we can explain everything to Mama and ask her to keep your secret." Lucy tried to insist. "Lucy, why bother Betty for nothing?" For some reason, Archie was sure he would be better off incognito. Why, he couldn't explain, but how could an old woman, brought up in Soviet traditions, accept the fact that her daughter was living with a wanted criminal? She'll be worried sick, she'll worry about you, and she'll have a negative attitude towards me. Why disturb the peaceful atmosphere of the house and get on everyone's nerves? Lucy suddenly agreed with this argument, and later, Mama Selena supported Archie's position. It was true that neither Archie nor Selena had much faith that Betty could be disturbed by this information. Both of them suspected that the woman still didn't care about her daughter and was only using her as a tool to fix her own affairs. But neither mother nor son voiced their suspicions aloud. Lucy had suggested to her mother that she go with them to visit Selena, but Betty had refused each time. She said she was embarrassed to meet a neighbor with whom she had been less than polite. In the future, she would, but for now, she wasn't ready. In fact, Betty took the opportunity to be alone in the empty apartment and explore it properly. She quickly found her daughter's main documents and studied them carefully. She looked through all the cupboards and boxes and made a small inventory of the family's jewelry. Surprisingly, there were few of them, though Betty had expected that Lucy, having begun to receive substantial sums of money after an almost poverty-stricken childhood, would go on a lavish spending spree. But it turned out that her daughter was not at all interested in gold or diamonds. The young people had a good closet, modern appliances, cool computers. However, their value Betty could not estimate. A good fresh car, but she couldn't find any signs of luxury. However, in the wall of Sashka's office, she found a cunningly hidden safe, the contents of which she still remained unknown. Perhaps the main valuables were kept there. From Betty's point of view, it would be reasonable. When she was alone, she would call Father Jack and talk to him for long periods of time. On weekdays, it was impossible. The house phone was always busy with Archie, and the street phones were not suitable for the kind of conversations the rector and the parishioner were having. Betty gave Jack Walker all the information she had gleaned, discussed future plans, and of course, received spiritual counsel. Without regular meetings at the brothers and sisters, it was hard for her to keep her spirits up. But Jack tried to support her as best he could. Betty urged him to deal with Lucy quickly, suggested a car accident on the way out of the office, but Jack's father was not satisfied with that. It seemed to him too unreliable and risky for the executors. It was easy to spotlight a car that would be instantly found by license plate number and characteristic damage, and it would be very easy to damage the driver of that car. Jack couldn't take that risk, and eventually the conspirators managed to devise another plan. Lucy only walked to two places, a sports club and a beauty parlor. Both of them were 15 minutes walk from home, and it seemed unreasonable for her to take a car for such a distance. She visited the sports club twice a week and the beauty salon weekly. Usually it was in the evenings, after Lucy returned from work. On one such evening, a young woman returning from a training session was hit by a car. It was nearing fall. It was getting dark early enough that there were few passersby on the street. And those who were could not remember either the make or the number of the dark, unattractive car that suddenly flew out onto the sidewalk, hit the girl with the hood, ran her over and disappeared around the corner. Actually, there were only two witnesses, young boys, yesterday's school children. One of them immediately rushed to Lucy, the other rushed to the machine to call an ambulance. They just ignored the car. The car was found a couple of days later in one of the neighboring alleys, with a couple of doses of cocaine in the glove compartment and traces of track on the dashboard. The car had been reported stolen and had apparently been abandoned by the carjacker, who had been frightened by a drug-induced murder he had committed. At least, that's what the operatives on Lucy's case decided. A typical case, no need to look for criminals, it's all for nothing. That's exactly what Jack Walker was counting on. A few days after Lucy's funeral, Betty approached Archie. "Sasha, where you keep the documents?" "What papers?" The guy didn't understand. "Well, for the apartment, for the car," explained Betty, not the least bit embarrassed. "I'll have to formalize the inheritance." Archie realized he was in trouble. He could have realized it earlier, but the grief after Lucy's death was too strong, and the guy could not think straight. But then it was as if his brain had turned on. "Betty, it was 6 months before that," Archie wondered. "So what?" "I've got to get ready. See if I need to call a technician to the apartment, update the paperwork, check which banks Lucy had accounts with, make inquiries. I also need to find out how the business is inherited. I don't know anything about it yet. I need to consult," Betty said calmly and businesslike, without any embarrassment. "I understand it was all in Lucy's name, and I'm the sole heiress, so I'm the one to deal with it. I'm an old woman and it'll be 6 months before I've been through all the authorities and consulted." "Betty." Archie was agonizing over what to do next, and at the same time he tried very hard not to show the indignation that was boiling up in him. Look at her, 9 days after Lucy's death, and she's already going after the inheritance. "Betty, of course, you are the sole heiress by law," he confirmed, "but you realize that all this, the apartment, the firm, the car, all of it, Lucy and I have gained together. It's my labor, my time, my strength. So I think I'm entitled to a share of the property. I suggest you give me the firm. It would be impossible for you to run it anyway, and you can have the rest. It's only fair." "What firm? What inheritance? How will you formalize it on yourself, you idiot?" ran through Archie's head. "You'll be caught instantly. You're still under the statute of limitations." But the man decided to deal with problems as they arose. First, it was necessary to defend his honestly gained property from the sudden competitor, and then to think how this honestly gained property could be relatively honestly formalized. "I've seen how you profited," Betty grinned sarcastically. "Lucy worked like a horse, and you sat at home, playing on the computer and talking on the phone. It's not much of a job. And anyway, if you're so fair, why did you live with Lucy without registration for so many years? If you'd signed a marriage license, you'd be the first in line here now too. We split everything in half and be done with it. No, you were cheating. You didn't want to commit yourself. Now you're sitting there cooing." Archie choked with indignation. There was nothing to say. He hadn't intended to tell Leon about the true reason for his and Lucy's cohabitation before, but now he thought it was simply dangerous. Explaining to her what part of the work he, Archie, was doing for her and Lucy's business was simply not possible. He had to think of something else, but he wasn't ready to think now. "Legally, of course, you're right, Betty," he repeated, "and I can't argue with that. May I ask you a favor?" Betty raised her eyebrow questioningly. "Could I stay in this apartment for a while? Until the inheritance is finalized, you and I are both on a bird's-eye basis. But you'll get this place afterward, and I have nowhere to go. I'll try to earn money for a new corner as soon as possible, and I won't bother you too much." Archie spoke so heartily and modestly that Betty suddenly felt sorry for the lad. Really, she thought, he's got nowhere to go. He's just been through a great grief. Let him live. What's the use? And I'll need some more information from him. "Lie," she nodded regally. "If you'll still go shopping for groceries and cooking, you can live for the whole 6 months. It won't be a pity." Archie shone and rushed to thank the old woman. A few days after the explanation with the failed son-in-law, Betty woke up in the middle of the night. Footsteps were clearly audible in the room. Archie, the bastard, thought the woman. No other way than to strangle me in my sleep, or some other mischief. Well, I'll give it to him. She opened her eyes. A street lamp was shining outside the window, illuminating the bedroom, not too brightly, but enough to make sure the room was empty. I was dreaming, Betty thought, but the footsteps sounded again. Silent at first, as if from far away, they grew louder and louder, more and more distinct, and finally came to a halt beside her bed. Almost above the woman's ear, someone's breath rustled. Betty froze under the covers and squeezed her eyes tightly shut. "Mommy," said a quiet female voice. "Mommy." Betty flinched and suddenly remembered the lamp above the bed. Abruptly, she flicked the switch and the space around the bed was illuminated. It was empty. What the hell? But a heavy sigh sounded above her ear, and then familiar footsteps rustled toward the window. The curtain swayed slightly, as if from an occasional draft, and the room was silent. Since that night, Betty had lost her peace. She kept seeing footsteps in the apartment, first at night and then during the day. Sometimes they sounded beside her, and sometimes they came from the empty bedroom or the kitchen. Once, when she couldn't stand it, the woman even dragged Archie into the empty room and started to convince him that someone was walking in it. The man looked sympathetically, assured her he couldn't hear anything, and advised some kind of sedative. But Betty knew her sin had taken hold. Lucy would not leave her. She would stay by her side even in death, and there was no way to fight it. During the day, the invisible guest simply walked around the rooms. But at night, she walked around Betty's bedroom, approached her bed, and quietly called, "Mama," and even the lamp, which the woman did not put out until morning, could not deter her. The obsessions haunted the woman not only in the apartment. During walks, she suddenly began to hear her daughter's name constantly. "Lucy," shouted a girl under the window, calling her girlfriend Lucy. Exclaimed a guy with a stunted bouquet, rushing to meet the girl. "Lucy," sternly said the woman to her little daughter, pulling her away from the puddle. And on the signs of various salons, stores, and kiosks, the name of Lucy was repeatedly flashed. It was amazing how Betty had never noticed it before. One day she was passing by a stranger's house with a radio playing loudly through the windows. Suddenly, in the middle of a song, a tender child's voice sounded. A little girl was repeating over and over again, "I forgive you, I love you, I forgive you, I love you." Lucy had said the same thing, almost with the same intonation, when she came to make up with her mother after a scandal. Betty couldn't take it anymore. She called Father Jack from the payphone and, almost sobbing into the receiver, told him of her obsessions. The abbot listened to her attentively, then calmed her down for a long time and exhorted her to be patient, to pull herself together, not to pay attention, not to get worked up, not to believe in otherworldly nonsense. But this time the conversation with Father Jack did not help Betty. In her head, interrupting the voice of the man pouring from the tube, sang a child's voice, repeating two simple phrases. She returned home completely shattered. Archie, seeing the woman's condition, was seriously concerned. He almost forced her to take some drops, put her to bed, and promised that she would sleep through the morning. But it was not to be. Betty did fall asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. But in the middle of the night, she awoke suddenly as if she had been struck. The lamp overhead was not lighted. She had gone to bed in the daytime, and Archie, of course, had not thought to turn it on. But the light of the lantern outside the window was enough to see a slender female silhouette against the curtains. A girl in a white robe, with loose blonde hair covering her face, stood at the windowsill and whispered softly, "Mommy." Noticing that Betty had opened her eyes, she slowly moved toward her. The sound of footsteps was painfully familiar. The girl stopped at the bedside and reached out her hand toward Betty's face. The hand reeked of icy coldness. Betty screamed and lost consciousness. She woke up to Archie shaking her by the shoulders. The light was on in the room, and the boy was standing over the bed in his underwear, disheveled, sleepy, and obviously frightened. "Betty, oh, thank God you're awake. What happened? You were screaming so much, it scared the shit out of me." "Shit, I gave you a good sleeping pill. You should have slept till morning." The woman suddenly cried, and then told Archie everything. He shook his head sympathetically, dragged Betty into the kitchen for tea, offered her valerian and some more serious sedatives from the stockpile. He didn't question her words like Father Jack had, didn't say it was all nonsense and nonsense. He even envied her a little because he didn't get to see the woman he loved after death. He looked down at her and seemed to brush away an invisible tear, and that suddenly made Betty even more attracted to the boy. They sat in the kitchen until dawn. It was only at first light that the woman finally decided to go back to bed. Over the next few days, she felt better. The presence of the ghost during the day was still manageable. In the evening, she took sedatives, and Archie sat by her side until she fell asleep. He had been very attentive since their conversation, treating her as gently as a fragile Christmas toy and caring for her in every way he could. Betty thought it was a good thing she hadn't sent the boy away right away. Without him, it would have been much harder to deal with all this mysticism. She wouldn't have been able to stand it. A few days later, Archie suddenly said, "Betty, I'm probably going to say something stupid. But you know, my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid that the dead don't just come to us, the living. They bother us because they have some business here on earth, some request for us. Next time you ask Lucy what she wants, maybe she'll tell you and you'll do as she asks and she won't bother you anymore." "Superstition," said Betty angrily, "though, you know, Archie, I might try it. If I don't freak out," she added, and went to bed. The otherworldly visitor came to her about 24 hours later. On a white day, by the way, though it was close to evening, but it was still daylight. These ghosts have got the nerve. When she heard the familiar footsteps behind her in the empty room, she pulled herself together and asked, trying to keep her voice as gentle as possible, "Lucy, my daughter, what are you walking about for? Why don't you lie still? What do you want?" "Mama." A quiet whisper spread through the room. "Mama. Fence. White one is needed, Mama. White fence. Bad with black one, Mama." The whisper came nearer and seemed to sound just above the woman's ear. Betty turned sharply, and immediately she heard a rustle, and a light draught touched her face. The footsteps receded toward the window. The quiet voice repeated the request for a fence once more and fell silent with them. Betty became excited. A hedge, a fence, hell, was it really that simple? Had she been going crazy for over a month over such a small thing? Just repaint the fence and her daughter would calm down and this nightmare would be over. "Archie," she shouted for joy. "Archie, have you got any white paint in the house?" There was no paint in the house. A trip to the store had to wait until morning. Betty had chosen the strongest and whitest enamel, and a couple of consultants had been almost hysterical. Along with the paint, she bought gloves, a brush, solvent, a rag to wipe the cemetery metal with solvent, sandpaper. Having chosen the paint, she listened to all the advice of the salesman about additional equipment. The woman could not imagine that something would go wrong. She would not be able to finish the work today, and her daughter would disturb her again. It was necessary to be fully insured. The bag was heavy, and she had to call a cab to the cemetery. The driver squinted perplexedly at the passenger, and he had never seen a woman go to the cemetery with an expression of joyful enthusiasm on her face. But Betty did not notice the slanting glances. From the gate to Lucy's grave, she walked almost at a run, and only when she finally came to the unfortunate fence was she able to catch her breath. Lucy was buried next to Barbara. They didn't put up a monument yet. It was too early. The earth would settle, and then they'd have to fix it anyway. But the fence on the plot was renewed. Earlier, Barbara's grave was surrounded by simple metal posts with chains stretched between them, and now there was a wrought iron openwork construction. But the old fence was really white, and the new one was painted bronze. No other way did Grandma Lucy put it up to put it back the way it was, thought Betty irritably, and she was not even surprised at her thoughts. She had always been a materialist, and even membership in the Brothers and Sisters could not change that. The woman believed in the doctrine of sin and purification, but she considered the stories about the afterlife, the kingdom of God, the eternal life of the soul, and other such things to be superstition and nonsense. It took only a month of contact with the other world to abandon her materialistic view of the world and take the supernatural for granted. Betty pulled on her gloves and got to work. She shoveled away small debris and attacking foxes from the graves, wiped the unfortunate fence with a damp rag, went over it with a metal brush, then brushed away the dust with a soft brush. Preparing to degrease the surface with solvent and take up a brush, she suddenly heard strange sounds coming from her daughter's grave. The woman listened, then cautiously approached closer. The sound was clearly coming from under a pile of wreaths. She carefully pushed the green ruffles aside, and then, frightened and at the same time strangely mesmerized by the incomprehensible noise, scattered them to the sides without any respect. There was nothing under the wreaths, but the noise had clearly increased. It seemed to be coming from beneath the ground. "I'd had enough of you, you bastard," said Betty, turning to her daughter. "I've come to paint your fence. Can't you bear it? Stay down and don't make any noise." From the grave again came incomprehensible sounds. "Damn you," said Betty, getting more and more angry. "I'm going to dig you up and strangle you with my own hands, just to be sure." With these words, the woman came close to the mound and leaned over it, listening. And then she began to rake furiously with her hands the earth, which had not yet compacted too much. It must have looked wild from the outside, but Betty didn't care. It didn't take long, though. Her hand came across something hard, and she grasped it, pulled it toward her, and pulled it out of the ground, stunned, and then with a heavy groan sank down on the dead grass. In her hand lay a portable audio speaker wrapped in polyethylene, from which came some inarticulate wheezing. The speaker was familiar, just like the one on Archie's desk. Archie, sitting in the bushes by the neighboring memorial that guarded the peace of several generations of a large family, cursed quietly. "I should have gotten out earlier when she started tossing wreaths," he belatedly thought. But the sight of an elderly woman ravaging her own daughter's graves so startled him that he let the moment pass. And lo and behold, Beatty had found the column. Just a couple more seconds and she'd figure it all out. "To hell with it. Let's go surrender," muttered Archie and stepped resolutely from his hiding place. "Betty, I'm sorry, I meant well. I didn't think you'd be so scared," mumbled the boy, embarrassed. "Did you arrange all this?" Betty asked, stunned. "I hit the speaker, yes." Archie repented. "I have it with a remote and a flash drive. I meant well, really. I recorded that song you were talking about, and I thought I'd play it when you're working here. And you'll think Lucy's forgiven you, and you'll be relieved." "What song?" Betty couldn't get over it. "Well, you said you heard it on the radio. I'll put it on now," Archie realized, and took the player out of his pocket. Muttering, just a minute," he found the track he wanted, put the headphones in the older woman's ears and pressed play. A male voice sang something Betty thought was rambling but rhythmic. She wanted to take the headphones out, but Archie made signs that said listen, and at the end of the tape, a child's voice suddenly came on. "I forgive you. I love you. I forgive you. I love you." So it was just a song. Betty listened to the voice and couldn't believe it. Wait, but what about the rest of it? The voices, the footsteps, the breathing, the names, and then she came to me, herself, Lucy. Betty tried painfully to think, but her thoughts were jumbled and wouldn't cohere. "You didn't believe me, did you?" she exclaimed, feeling the anger boiling up inside her. "You decided to deceive me, to make fun of the old woman then." She sprang up from the ground with sudden impetuosity and lunged at Archie with her fists. But she stopped a step away from him and began to lurch slowly to the side. Her face was strangely twisted, and instead of an accusing cry, her mouth was a frightening wheeze, like that unfortunate speaker. Betty collapsed next to the fence and passed out. Archie leaned over the woman, felt for a pulse, and swore, now in a full voice. Then he pulled a cell phone out of his jacket pocket, huge as a brick and terribly uncomfortable. He didn't like it, but now he was glad he brought it with him. "Mom," he said quickly into the phone, "get behind the wheel and drive to the cemetery to see Lucy." "Quickly, I'll explain later." "Yes, don't drive in from the main gate, but from the side entrance, so the guard won't see you." Archie worked out his plan with his mother. Selena suggested that Betty should be easily suggestible and mystical, since she was in a cult. So Archie began to entertain. He placed several small but powerful speakers around the house, through which he broadcast the sounds of footsteps, breathing, whispers. He controlled the recordings with a remote control or put them on a timer, so as not to be too monotonous, and it would be suspicious if the ghost only appeared to Betty when Archie was home. The guy kept track of Betty's walks, and on her way back he coaxed passersby to say Lucy's name next to the woman. Some he'd tell about a prank for his favorite aunt. Others he'd bribe with a little money. He turned on the song with the words that he knew from her stories that Lucy had repeated to her mother like an incantation all of her childhood, lurking in the bushes near the house that Betty had passed. His speakers were powerful enough. The ghost was Celine's mom, dressed in a white hoodie and a blonde wig. They had calculated that after the sleeping pills Archie had given his mother-in-law, she wouldn't look at the details, and they had calculated correctly. The Barbaricans weren't planning anything bad. They wanted to convince Betty in the existence of the ghost, and then his mouth to command her to share with Archie inheritance. But things turned out differently. Exhausted by worry, by the need to lie and pretend again, by the separation from the brothers and sisters and the beloved rector, by the participation in the murder, albeit indirectly, by otherworldly entities, in short, by all the events of the past months, Betty suffered a stroke. She collapsed in the cemetery, and neither Archie nor Selena ever found out if the woman had figured out what it was really like. After calling Selena, Archie used his cell phone to call an ambulance. The doctors arrived on time, but thankfully still 5 minutes later than his mother. He had time to explain the situation to Selena, and he bushwhacked off to his car and left for her house. Selena, on the other hand, went to the hospital with Betty and cared for her in the intensive care unit for over a month. The ward was not allowed outsiders, but there was not enough staff, and another paralyzed old woman nobody was happy. So when Selena asked to help, she was allowed. A month later, she also moved Betty home to an apartment. The woman was still half paralyzed and unable to speak, but she promised to live a long time. Archie equipped the room with the peculiarities of the bedridden patients, hired a nurse. Together with his mother, they attacked the guardianship authorities, some by phone, Selena in person. Betty had no relatives, but there were witnesses who confirmed their long acquaintance, neighborhood, close communication with Selena. This circumstance, plus a little money, and Selena Babarikina officially became the guardian of Betty Silverstova, her former neighbor and failed sister-in-law. On the rights of guardian, Selena received the right to dispose of the inheritance due to Betty. She signed over the firm to herself, and Archie found an executive director who ran the business for several years. Naturally, none of the director's actions were without consultation with Archie. When the statute of limitations on his previous offenses ran out, Archie officially stepped in as director himself. Betty lived only 2 years after her stroke. Jack Walker, having lost contact with her, tried to track her down, but when he found her, he decided to remove himself from his former parishioner. Betty herself did not think anything. Next to her was Selena, who was busy with the guardianship. To the rich inheritance of his father, Jack was not to get close, and he preferred to forget about Betty as a failed project. And soon the activities of the Society Brothers and Sisters was interested in the prosecutor's office, and Jack Walker had other concerns. Celebrating his 45th birthday, Archie thought with satisfaction that all the same managed to fulfill the promise once made to his mother. Selena did not need anything, and Archie was sincerely proud of it. And in general, life had turned out well, except that he'd never had a family. After Lucy, all women seemed unsuitable for him to live together. A big photo portrait of her hung on the wall in his office for years, and on the girl's grave was a monument of pink marble, surrounded by an open-work white fence.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.